Well, this is the camera and the finishing line where in 1990 Steve Bauer and Eddie Plankett were separated by a centimetre. I honestly believe that without the camera they would have declared a dead heat in Paris-Roubaix in that year. Hi everybody, welcome back. It's now our coverage of the 105th running of Paris-Roubaix. I'm Phil Liggett, of course, joined by Paul Showin. And can you believe the weather in the month of April? They're saying it's going to be the hottest day in France for more than 40 years, with temperatures set to soar to over 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Paul, it's 160 miles in this heat.
It certainly is, and 28 section of cobblestones. The first one coming at Troisville. It's a very difficult one. That's where the first sort-out happens. But I think the most famous one we all look to as the decisive move is at Arenberg. The Forest of Arenberg, the famous tranchée, is a very difficult, long section of cobblestones. There's a new section of cobblestones in this year as well at Mont-Saint-Pével, and it's actually been nicknamed the cobblestones of Marc Maggio, a former two-time French winner of Paris-Roubaix, and the big decision always comes down at the end at the famous Pavé de l'Arbre.
And interestingly, they put all the barriers up in the Forest of Arenberg on Thursday and then decided to take them all down again. So there's going to be a tremendous atmosphere now as the crowd will be right up against the riders as the riders come through at the famous cobble stretch in Arenberg. Well, yesterday they presented all of the riders to the public, and of course, Paul Showin was there. Let's see what they had to say.
So the man in black. Big day tomorrow, Paris-Roubaix. It's an important day, and a lot of people are talking about Gusev being the danger man.
Yeah, I think he's shown in the last couple of weeks he's got some pretty good form, but he's going to have a friend up there in our team as well, Thomas Vikus. He stopped in get well on Wednesday. He's had a little bit of knee trouble, but he's okay now, and he's my dark horse for Paris-Roubaix, Thomas Vikus.
Well, I've been to Paris-Roubaix for many, many years, but I don't think I've ever seen weather like this. Is it going to make it a difficult race?
I think for the first time we're going to actually have to really worry about how much we drink tomorrow. It's usually they're putting hot tea in our bottles at the start of the race, and instead we're going to have ice in the coolers. So, 6 or 7 hours in 26, 27 degrees. We're not used to training at this time of year in such hot conditions, so we're really going to have to watch the bottles we take in tomorrow. That's for sure.
And also have to watch the dust getting into the eyes once you go through the cobble sections instead of mud.
We looked on the course yesterday. It was a dust storm, and there was only like 10 of us in one car. You throw in another 190 bike riders and a few motorbikes and cars. Yeah, it's going to be hard for vision, that's for sure.
Good racer.
Always is. Always is.
Well, Dirk, as a team manager, I know this is a race that you always get very motivated by, having been yourself a former winner.
Yeah, it's true. Every time we come back here to Compiègne, start of Roubaix, good memory, that's for sure. Also, we went to see a part of the course on Friday, and once that see the first couples, it's like again, wow.
The excitement's there. It's a pity there's no George Hincapie this year, but there is Gusev, there is Stein de Volder, and Thomas Vikus, some people are saying, could be the surprise.
I think so, because we have seen so far this season Vikus in very, very good shape. And for me, the body that he has is like really made for Paris-Roubaix. And he surprised me last Sunday in Flanders, finishing 6th, and I'm sure you never know what's going to go, but bad luck, I don't know. Hopefully we stay out of trouble, and I think he can do better than last Sunday, Vikus.
The weather conditions are very different too. The riders will have to be a little bit more careful. It's not going to be the same kind of selection in the dry.
That's true, but I think last hour there will be anyway a big selection because we have done Roubaix when it was dry like now, but never warmer than 16, 17 degrees. And now they announced 27, so it means at the end there will be riders everywhere.
Stefan, you've been to this race many, many times. Could you tell me, have you ever seen weather like this for Paris-Roubaix?
No, it will be the first time without underwear.
It's amazing. It's almost like a summer day, and that's going to make the tactics a little bit different too, because the selections will probably be made closer to the finish.
Yeah, it could be. That's the problem in good conditions. It's till 200. It's about 50, 60 riders think they could win. So it's a couple more fights before the pavés. But anyway, well, it's a race. Everybody's same condition. I mean, I prefer rain in this race, but we have summer.
But the thing is, even at the end, when you do get the Pavé de l'Arbre, everybody's still been in the saddle for about 6 hours.
Yeah, that's it. So after 5.5, 6 hours, and will be a selection for the last 10, 15 riders.
Stefan Weissman going to be there?
Thanks, and I hope so. Bye.
Well, Magnus, great to see you here. Great weather. Paris-Roubaix, that's your race.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. You know, it's been I had to sit out a year last year due to injury, so you know, I'm back, double motivation to do something good here.
What's so special about Paris-Roubaix? Why do people get motivated by this event?
For me, it's just the fact that there is no other race that looks like it on the calendar. You know, you can do 160 days a year if you want racing, and everything looks pretty much more the same, you know. And Paris-Roubaix is just that one day that stands out from everything else. So for me, that's, and plus the history behind it as well, you know.
Some people say that it's a man's race, and down towards the end, it's just a question of survival, and you've got to have legs. There are no more tactics in the end.
I think that's true, you know, it's a survival of the fittest, and you know, it's such a grueling race. It takes a lot out of you, both physically and mentally. So I think you're right there. It comes down to, you know, who's the biggest man on the day.
Nico, we've been watching you these last few weeks in the Belgian national champions jersey, and you're always near the front in these kind of races.
Yeah, we have to do its best. It's the most important of the season for us. So tomorrow we have also a race like that, and we have to do our best, and we have to try in the front.
Even though this is a race in France, it's a race that is very much a Flemish race. It's the Flemish riders and the Belgian riders who really enjoy Paris-Roubaix.
Yeah, it's something special, and it's between the years, and always the Belgian and the French riders are strong here. So it's something special for them.
And with this national champions jersey on your shoulder, you're a lot more easy to see for the spectators.
Yeah, that's true. But it's nice to be in these races with this jersey. I like it.
Okay, good luck tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thanks. Well, I read in the newspapers this week in Belgium that you've been really waiting for this day to turn up.
Yeah, it's like you're waiting for it not only this week but the whole winter and the whole beginning of the season. You live for this weekend actually. So.
But a lot of riders were dreaming of it maybe going to rain, and it's like a summer's day, 25 degrees Celsius.
Yeah, that's okay for me.
I hear from the rest of the team that your form is pretty good as well.
If you're second in Tour of Flanders, I don't know if you saw the pictures, so condition is good, yes.
I saw the pictures, but it was the training ride over the cobblestones yesterday where you left everybody behind.
Yeah, but that's just training. Tomorrow is the race, that counts.
To win Paris-Roubaix, would that wipe away the sadness of second place in the Veronda?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Well, first of all, Tom, a lot of people in the United States don't know how bad your crash was last week. How bad was it?
Well, after all, it was okay. In the race Sunday, I wasn't feeling so good. I had some pain in my wrist and my knees, but I survived. So maybe I'm survived and get stronger.
Well, you've had a good week to get over the crash. You rode Wevelgem in the wheels, if I might say, but now Paris-Roubaix, that's a big rendezvous for you.
Yeah, of course. Last Sunday and today and tomorrow are the two biggest races of the spring season. And Sunday I was feeling a little bit bad because if you feel pain the entire day, it gets in your mind and it starts playing with you. But I feel better now, so I hope I have a good day tomorrow, and we got some good weather, so it will be a nice day.
A lot of people say it'll be a very strange Paris-Roubaix because of the weather, and maybe you'll actually have to play a waiting game.
It was the same last weekend. It makes it more difficult for the stronger riders to get in front. But if you saw last Sunday, it was just one long sprint to the Muur, and it was the first time in my career we got there with 65 or 70 riders. So, and if you take notice that there were like 25 crashes, normally would have been 100 riders in the bottom of the Muur. So it makes it more difficult, but eventually the strong riders will get in front.
Well, last week, Tour of Flanders didn't go exactly the way you wanted, but this has always been the race that you've been looking at.
Yeah, sometimes you have to learn maybe before this race to do sometimes also the wrong decision, and I learned a lot in the last two races from Ghent-Wevelgem and Ronde van Vlaanderen, and now for Paris I'm ready. I'm more ready than last week, and it's coming good.
Last year was a little bit of a surprise, maybe not for you, but for a lot of other people, when you went away so far from the finish. But now you'll have a big ticket on your back that says, this is a former winner of Paris-Roubaix.
Yeah, sure, something that makes me also happy that now the riders, they stay behind me because they know when I go. But they have to maybe attack before, and the good thing is I can follow. We have a strong team. Well, we have one goal, and this is win tomorrow, the race.
Okay, good luck.
Thank you.
Stewie, long time really since you've been to Paris-Roubaix, because you had to miss it last year.
Yeah, it was certainly a different aspect. Learning, sitting back, watching on TV with a beer. It's not quite the same, but definitely prefer to be here amongst it.
Well, your man Fabian Cancellara is looking in fine form, but you're also, I think, in some pretty good form this season.
Yeah, I think I've got the same kind of form that I finished off the year with last year, and I think it's, you know, to be honest, it's probably the best I've gone. You know, and with such a strong team, you know, tomorrow we've got the pressure, we've got the responsibility, we've got the defending champion. You know, I just hope to play a pretty important role in the team winning again tomorrow.
What about yourself? Because I know this is one of the races that for many, many years you've been super motivated by.
I'm excited, yeah. It's not very often I get nervous or excited before a race, but, you know, tomorrow's, the last week has been what I'm building up for the last 18 months. It's all that's been going through my mind, and, you know, I may have to sacrifice my personal, you know, wants and needs tomorrow, but for Fabian, he's the clear-cut favourite. I think he's a step above everyone else, but we've got to be ready in case anything happens out on the road, and if anything does happen, then I'll be there to back it up, I hope.
Tell me one thing, I mean, I was the same when I raced. This race was a very special race to me. You get up in the morning, you are nervous. Why is it different to any other race in the year?
Because it's the hell of the north. It's dangerous. It's chaos. It's an adventure. You know, every rider, no matter if they've done 100k or 270k, they get to the velodrome. Everyone's got their own story. You know, everyone's got their ups and downs, and you know, everyone's been in a crash or near a crash, and it's just you know, it's an adventure. It's a huge feeling of achievement to make it to the velodrome, and it's one thing to do that, and it's one thing to be up there going for the win. And I think Paris-Roubaix, you wouldn't be here if you didn't like it. Okay, thanks.
Scotty, nervous day for Paris-Roubaix. Different weather, 25 degrees Celsius. A lot of pressure on the shoulders of your team.
Yeah, I mean, Fabian last year was a little bit of an outsider, or, you know, on the second line of favourites, so he had a little bit more space to move. So this year, you know, he's coming out as outright favourite here for this race, and he's shown that how strong he is. So, yeah, everybody's expecting a lot from him, and he expects a lot from himself. On the other hand, the team is so much stronger. They're so much more confident now. They've been through it once. They know what they have to do to be there again this year. Okay, we're going to have to turn the tactics around a little bit to suit the weather conditions, because it is quite rare weather conditions for Paris-Roubaix. I just spoke with Duke Sassal. He said he's never seen this before. So I think it's probably the best thing is that nobody knows really how it's going to go tomorrow. But I think we made some good adjustments for a few different things, and hopefully all pan out how we want it to.
Yeah, the tactics are going to have to change quite dramatically, and I think for a lot of people it's going to be like the Tour of Flanders, pretty much of a waiting game, and maybe a big bunch of riders going into the last section of cobbles.
Yes and no. Yes and no. I don't think you should get too comfortable with that idea. I see that a few people are. Cobbles are cobbles. If they're wet or dry, they're still very, very hard. And instead of having mud, you have now sand, which is just as dangerous. Believe me, when you're hitting sand, a patch of sand on cobblestones, it's very slippery. So the biggest thing tomorrow is going to be the nutrition against the heat. Whereas other years, the cold, you know, you sort of feel a hunger coming on slowly. The same with thirst. But here you're going to have dust always in your mouth, and you know, that's going to make your mouth constantly dry. The feeling of wanting to eat when you got a dusty mouth is not really that.
It's going to be important, really, isn't it, to have a good team around you, because sometimes the team car can't even get there to give you drinks.
That's going to be about that, especially like I'm not that well placed tomorrow. So it's going to be very, very important that Fabian and the other guys are there and getting the drink bottles when they need. I have a lot of people standing on the roads there for tomorrow. I think just
official and unofficial.
Official and unofficial. I've got like every second section is somebody standing with water bottles, and I see that as being the key point is having enough water bottles tomorrow. I really think that's going to be it. We've got big guys here, and big guys need a lot of water, and yeah, we'll have to wait and see. No worries.
Well, we're a week down the road from the Tour of Flanders. Slightly different weather conditions. Some people are saying the Antipodeans, like yourself and Stuart O'Grady, are going to have the advantage because of this weather.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's certainly something we haven't experienced in recent years. So, you know, I think it's going to be, as always in Paris-Roubaix, a few surprises.
It's always going to be, I think, with this temperature, a lot tougher for the Belgians because they don't like the hot weather. But you guys from Australia and New Zealand, you should be used to something like this, and that might tilt the advantage to your way.
Yeah, definitely, especially in the springtime. For me personally, the colder weather is something I always struggle with. So, you know, I think, like you say, tomorrow could particularly be an advantage for us guys that have come from the Southern Hemisphere.
And how about your man, Thor Hushovd? He wasn't too bad in the Tour of Flanders, but he's had a week to get himself stronger.
Yeah, I think both myself and Thor, we're getting stronger and stronger. You know, we had sickness, both of us, around the time of Milan-San Remo, and you know, we were better on Wednesday and getting well again. And I think that tomorrow we're going to be better again. Okay, thanks.
So we're looking at a glorious day in Paris-Roubaix, and the forecasts are absolutely right. You think we're now in midsummer rather than the second week of April. We're looking at the peloton here as they now make their way away from the sector 23 of cobblestones. We had sector 28 and the breakaway of some 33 riders, approximately 5 minutes in front.
A little bit of a problem at the back here. There's been a number of problems throughout the afternoon. We're looking here at the Japanese champion, and this is Fumiyuki Beppu from Team Discovery Channel. He went down pretty hard, and I think this may well be the first time he's ridden in the Tour and the Paris-Roubaix.
Well, he's a baptism of fire for everybody that comes to this race. It's been a very active day of racing, I can tell you, because right out at the start this morning, some 30 kilometres in, the leading group of 33 got clear. Now, this was no ordinary leading group. There are some big names in it, and there are 19 of the 24 teams with riders up front. And for that reason alone, it may take some bringing back. We'll catch pictures of the leading group very shortly, but let me tell you straight away that in that leading group are the Australian Stuart O'Grady and Luke Roberts. They've made the split. In fact, Team CSC have got 3 riders up there. The British rider Roger Hammond, who rode so well midweek in the Ghent-Wevelgem, has made another big breakaway here today. And in that group also of 33 riders, we've got the sprinter Julian Dean and a number of other riders, including the former champion of Belgium, Tom Steels. A very interesting composition.
Looking back at the main field again here, Phil, I noticed that Team Astana have come up to the front. A lot of teams now trying to organise themselves, but the gap the last time Radio Tour crackled through was 5 minutes and 5 seconds. I think it's going to be a very difficult gap to pull back here this afternoon because it is such a large breakaway. 32 riders, although 1 or 2 have been lost on these early section of cobblestones.
Back onto the bone-jarring stones again now. This is sector 22 of 28 at Verchin. And the breakaway being driven, or rather the chase group being driven by Discovery Channel now, because they are one of the teams today. They've only got one rider in the front, and that is Volodymyr Bileka, who's in the leading group. Everybody else is going to have to wonder if they've got the right man up there, and I would probably think they haven't. They're waiting now, of course. Once they get to the Forest of Orenburg, where there's a massive crowd as always, then they know that about 100 kilometres to race, they really are going to have to get a move on, because at the moment this breakaway, rather than going back, is actually stretching its lead over these early sectors of cobblestones.
There's some good riders in that breakaway, and I suppose it's something that's had to happen this afternoon, because after all, the weather is quite phenomenal. A lot of riders I was talking to yesterday were saying, well, don't be surprised if there is an early breakaway today, because nobody wants to wait and have the chaos like this. And this is what it's like at the back end of the main field. All these riders have been left behind, trying to pull themselves back into the race.
Well, as they get problems, and more largely it's not the legs, it is the tyres that give way first in Paris-Roubaix. Riders stopping on the side of the road, having to take new tyres. Frank Renier is the rider in the blue shorts, trying to get back into the action. But you see, the other problem is that the cars block the road, not intentionally, of course, but it's a case of squeezing through as best you can. And dust is going to be a huge problem to the riders today, and dust in the eyes is very, very unpleasant indeed. I think the riders in many cases would have preferred the weather to have been slightly less clement than it is today.
Well, it's always difficult, Paris-Roubaix, whatever the weather conditions, but certainly it's going to be difficult, I think, for the riders when it comes to hydration, because they're going to have to go back to the team cars a lot to get on board as much drink as possible. We're looking at about 25 degrees Celsius in the middle part of the afternoon, and that is something we've hardly ever seen before for a race like this.
Never. There's Putsep at the front, the champion of Estonia, driving the breakaway along at the moment. And this is the Tom Steels, I think it is. No, it's not. It's Van Avermaet, who's getting an adjustment at the back. Now, this is a young man who's a brand new professional, and this year, when nobody had heard of him, he goes over to the Tour of Qatar and he wins the 5th day of racing there. He virtually hadn't started his racing career as a pro, and he already had a win under his belt. And he's read this move as well, Paul, and he's in the breakaway, and nobody really knows just how good he is yet.
Well, nobody knows just yet. He's a young rider, as you said, 23 years of age. Looking back here, this is the front end of the main group. Van Avermaet just off the back end getting some mechanical assistance. That's the only time the riders have a chance to do this is in between the cobblestone sections, because on the cobblestones you need to be in complete control. Matty Breschel looks as if he's got himself back into this breakaway group, and Stuart O'Grady, I think, a big danger this afternoon. Everybody worried about the fact that these hot weather conditions could very much suit the Australian.
This is not, as I said earlier, the normal type of breakaway. This is to be paid attention to. These boys know that they have a real chance of winning this race from a breakaway. And it's been done before. It's not unprecedented. It was done in the late 80s when Dirk de Mol won from a long, long breakaway that went at about 17 kilometres, I think it was, just after the gun anyway. And it was in similar conditions, although it certainly wasn't as warm as this, because this is like a summer's day in the height, or it could well be, when with hindsight at the end of the year, the hottest day of the year, because it is very, very warm.
Well, these guys, I think there's a lot of riders in this group who realise there's a very good chance here to create the surprise. Stuart O'Grady at the front here, Phil, he definitely read this move very carefully indeed. They've lost a little bit of their advantage. It's 4 minutes and 10 seconds to the group of chasers a little bit further back. The last time check I got was 5 minutes and 5 seconds to the main field.
Yes, and Radio Tour's just given us 4 minutes 20, but on television you can see 4 minutes 10. So they have had their advantage reduced very slightly. Team AG2R have got 2 riders in this breakaway, Stéphane Poulis and Nicolas Rousseau. And the skill riders here, they've got 3 riders in the breakaway, and one just trying to walk off the front here. But
well, that's the front end of the main field. You can see there are still a lot of riders in with a chance. These riders, I think, have come back from the leading group. And
I think that was Baquet, because he was in the breakaway and has been dropped. So he's probably about now he's being picked up by the peloton, these riders. And that looks to me as though it might be Luke Roberts there too. And Luke has had a flat tyre, sadly, punctured, and never got back up to the leaders. So that's rather sad for the Australian. He's now back in the main field as well.
Well, a lot of riders and a lot of teams have seriously missed out. Discovery Channel, I'm a bit surprised, Phil, to see a group of 32 riders and they've only got 1 man in it.
So as we look here now at the rear of the group, and still keeping the pressure on, this is the main field at the moment, and the skill riders still have 2 riders up in the break, including Clément L'Hotellerie, new boy on the block, and a new professional, Floris Gusinin, also up there as well.
Well, a couple of teams will be happy with the composition of the group, especially T-Mobile. They've got their man Roger Hammond in the breakaway. And I have a feeling Hammond is a man looking for a performance here this afternoon. As you said, Phil, earlier, he finished second in Ghent-Wevelgem just a couple of days ago after what he thought was a little bit of a disappointing Tour of Flanders.
There's another crash here. I'm not too sure where this crash has happened as we swing back up to the rider in the ditch, but it's one of the Astana riders, so it's from the peloton, because Astana have got no riders in that breakaway at all, and this is Aaron Kemps. Well, the Australians are making the headlines any which way they can at the moment, with either in the breakaway, falling off, or being caught. But this is Aaron Kemps now, who's going to have to get back into the group. He shouldn't have too much trouble. He doesn't look injured. He just tumbled into the grass. Ironically, you don't need to crash on the smooth roads of Paris-Roubaix because you've got plenty of bad roads to fall off on as we move up. Now, interestingly enough, today they've decided to take away all the safety barriers for reasons of safety, which sounds rather ironic, in the Forest of Arnhenberg. They put them out on Thursday, and then they decided they were too dangerous, making the road too narrow for the riders, so they've taken them away, and they're going to rely on the people to behave themselves now when the race comes in there, because in the past, you may remember, we used to have big scenes of the crowd almost crushing the riders. They leaned forward to watch them go through, and that could well be the situation today when we get there, but we'll see. The Lamprey team, by the way, for many are carrying the race favourite, Alessandro Ballan, have only got one rider in the front group, and that is Enrico Franzoy. So they too will start chasing, I think, pretty soon.
It's going to be a long, hard chase. So this is the Tête de la Course. We're looking at 116 kilometres to go. That's around about 3 hours of racing. They've gone very fast out of the blocks this morning. And this could be the big surprise, because behind Phil, it's difficult to figure out who is actually going to turn the firepower on to chase down this breakaway. Team Quick-Step, they've really missed out as well. It's a slightly weakened team after all the injuries they had during the midweek. Ghent-Wevelgem, they had a number of their top riders going down in a crash. And their big names, of course, Tom Boonen and Peter van Petegem, have actually missed out on this move.
That's right, they are at a disadvantage. They've lost 5 riders this week, either with crashes or sickness, so they're really calling on their reserves for this race. So Tom Boonen certainly hasn't got the top team around him today, because they also had riders fall sick in a race in Spain. So this is the breakaway. It's down by about 3 now, because Andreas Clear from T-Mobile, who was in this front group, stopped and gave Roger Hammond a wheel. Roger had a flat tyre on one of the pavé sectors, and he got back very quickly. Clear didn't get back, and we think he's also now back in the peloton. So it's about 30 riders left up front at the moment. The Wiesenhof rider here at the front is Arthur Gacher, who is actually, he sounds like a Russian name, but he's actually, I think he's a Belgian cyclist, a German rider rather, as he swings down in that green jersey. And Milram also here, only one rider here, Rolf Grabsch of Team Milram. His brother's also here. His brother races on a different team though. Bert Grabsch, who rides for Team Mobile, he's in the breakaway. Number 42, Ludovic Augier from Française des Jeux.
Well, it doesn't look to me as if there's too many passengers in this breakaway, which what makes me think they're going to have a very hard time pulling this breakaway back into the main field. You can see now they're in a fairly long line, and the big advantage the breakaway has on a day like today, Phil, is there's hardly any wind at all. And what makes this race very difficult normally, if it's not a rainy condition, it's the very big strong winds you get in this northern part of France. But today, that seems to be completely absent.
The weather pattern is so different. They call it global warming, but there's no doubt it's different today. There's just a lovely breeze. This is the most idyllic day to do anything except ride in Paris-Roubaix, I would think. And there'll be huge crowds once we get to the sectors of Pavé. We've just seen the latest time check. Started to improve again now to 4.5 minutes. And from the helicopter, you can see all the group. I'm hesitating because I'm just listening to, they've actually now completed 3 hours of riding already, as they're now, so they can reckon on another 3 hours before we get to the finish, I'm afraid. And the bad roads await as we race across the flatter sections of northern France, heading for the start of the cobbles. We've been over the section that always launches the cobblestones is at Troisville, which comes at the 98 kilometre in. And then the real bad ones, we have to wait a little bit longer. They all really come once we're through the Forest of Arnhenberg. And that's after 163 kilometres, with just almost exactly, in fact, 100 kilometres or 62 miles still to race.
You can see few riders now starting to hold back a fraction. You can just hear that squealing noise. That, in fact, is the riders who are using carbon fiber rims on their wheels, and that gives them a little bit of rigidity. A lot of riders on a day like today will ride their tire pressures just that little bit lower than normal. Normally, you would pump the tires up to around about 110 at PSI, but today I would expect many of these riders will be riding them at around about 80 PSI. We're looking here at the riders at around about 120 kilometers to go.
That puts us about 20 kilometers away from the forest. And although we are very much in France, it gives you the feeling we're actually racing across Belgium today. And you'll see a lot of the flags of Flanders flying. A lot of the spectators who come in are from Belgium. And the Belgians indeed are the riders who triumphed most in this classic over the years. They've won it 51 times, while France is second best with 30 victories, because this is the 105th edition of Paris-Roubaix. But there have in fact been 105 winners already, because there was once, it wasn't a dead heat, but there was a mistake on the routing and riders came from both directions, can you believe? And so the riders from both directions were given the victory. So there was an occasion when we had 2 winners. That hasn't happened for many, many years, by the way, and it's very unlikely it will happen again. There's the gaps. The riders in between, they're just riders left by the leading group, and 4:36 now, so it has gone out a little bit more, another 6 seconds. So they started to improve again now. Fabien Baquet, the French rider on the skill squad, is also in between. So that might be his timing. The others, I think, including Andreas Clear, have been picked up by the peloton. There's certainly 2 T-Mobile riders left here. So Roger Hammond is still here with his teammate Bert Grabsch, rather. Hammond did a remarkable ride on Wednesday in the Ghent-Wevelgem Classic. It's a 200-kilometer classic, just slightly more. And he got into the break in the first few minutes of the race. 3 of them got away and survived all the way to the end with a dramatic chase over the last hour, when the peloton were only seconds behind and never closed the gap. And Hammond still managed to get second behind his teammate who won, Marcus Burkhardt. Burkhardt, by the way, is in the race today. He's already had problems too. He's in the peloton, he's punctured, but he has said that he's very happy with the way things are going, because he feels that Hammond in the breakaway is a very, very good situation to have just at the moment.
They're all bunching up together a fraction. They're about to start the next section of cobbles. The best way to ride these cobblestone sections, Phil, is actually to make sure that you ride it in the first 1 or 2 places, and then you can pick your own line over the cobbles. But very rarely do you see these guys bunching up on the cobblestones like this.
Into sector 22, which is about 1,600 meters long. Just take a few seconds to watch how these riders ride these cobblestones, because first of all, they feel the best way is at high speed, pedaling a high gear, and they hold on to those handlebars, but not till the knuckles are white, because all they finish up with that way is blisters on the palms of their hands. But they'll ride dead center, because that tends to be the safest bet. If you try to ride on the edges, well, the edges sometimes disappear, and so do you. And the crowd, of course, do stand very close.
It's also down the edges there at the side of the road where you're more likely to end up getting a flat tire, and you certainly don't want a flat tire in a race like this, because on these cobblestone sections the team cars can be as much as 2 minutes in arrears, and that's an awful long time to try and bridge the gap. But that's why you find most of the riders who are good at riding these cobblestone races try to ride right in the middle of the track.
And the rider who's completely contradicting what we were saying there, Iban Ariondo of Spain, well, I have to say the Spanish really don't like being in this race at all. And it's not their style of riding, but their team is obliged to come to the event. And so this rider, Iban Ariondo, has found himself in the breakaway.
A couple of riders, they're prepared to take the risk, you see, because it's just that little bit easier. And some guys, when they're in a little bit of under a bit of pressure, Phil, what they will do is they'll try and ride on that smooth bit of dirt down towards the side, because it is an awful lot smoother. But you do, as I say, risk the chance of, first of all, coming up against a spectator, but secondly, hitting a small sharp stone and finding yourself with a flat tire.
Good riding by Ralph Grabsch at the moment as he puts the pressure on, tempting anybody to come and join him, but they really want to be first. They want to see the road and see where the holes are, and he's actually gone way ahead of the group here. I can't see the actual sense in getting too far ahead, because it's too far to go, But at least the German rider, Ralf Grabs, his brother's in the breakaway with him, as I say, he's on the rival team, T-Mobile. With Grabs pushing on here and keeping out of the dust and the spray over his eyes.
Well, he's opened up a bit of a gap. He's using a little bit of energy here as well. I think it's much more sensible if these guys were to ride together and keep together as a group. He may well be trying to provoke a little bit of a break at the front end of this small group, which is becoming almost like a main field for the moment. You can see that the riders are riding on the left-hand side, the right-hand side of the road, and they certainly are taking a number of risks. But in a few kilometers' time, we'll be coming up to the Forest of Arenberg, and that, to me, is where the serious race begins. And the Forest of Arenberg is a section of cobblestones which is 2.4 kilometers in length.
That's when the flags of war will be hoisted. I'm quite sure of that today. Right at the back here is Kevin van Impe, last off the cobblestones. And an interesting fact today is how life moves on as we say goodbye to Lars Mikkelsen of Denmark, riding his last bike race today in the colours of CSC. He's retiring now. He's had some great years. He won Ghent-Wevelgem a couple of years ago. I can tell you that in the junior, there's a junior Paris-Roubaix taking place today. It finishes a few hours ahead of the men and doesn't cover anything like the distance of the men. But taking part in that is the son of Davis Phinney, and Davis Phinney is the American who's won more bike races than anybody else, including a couple of stages of the Tour de France. And now Davis's son Taylor is taking part for representing the United States in the junior race. I can't promise to give you how he gets on because we're commentating, but if I see him flash by underneath our commentary position, I'll certainly report. And Davis, of course, married to Connie Carpenter, who won a gold medal in the Olympic Games in Los Angeles back in 1984 when she beat Rebecca Twigg in a sprint.
These are the cobblestones. These are the roads that have earned this race its nickname as the Hell of the North. These cobblestones, many of them go back to Napoleonic times. This is the main field now on sector 22 to go, 1600 meters. Regarded as being fairly easy, just being given a 3-star rating. It goes from Verchamp-Maugret to Kernenan. And I have to say the section a little bit further up the road for the Forest of Arenberg is rated as a 5-star rating, and I have to agree with that.
It's not only cobbled, it is actually gently uphill, and usually it's the first place of all of the crowds are out there. These are the giants of northern France here, of the Pas de Calais region. You'll see them all over on special occasions. They get the best view, that's for sure. On to the next sector now. This will be Kerrang, sector 21. And problems at the back.
This is the French national champion, Florent Bras, who's got a flat tyre. This is when you have to not panic at all. It looks to me as if it's the back wheel that he's got a flat tyre, and he's riding along, waiting and hoping that his team car is going to be in an ideal position. But he could find himself losing at least a minute, and that's why it's also important to have your car ranked highly in the convoy of cars behind you, because that means you get a quicker wheel change.
Yes, Florent Bras was one of that 3-man breakaway that was successful in Ghent-Wevelgem, but he wasn't with them in the end. He got left behind about 15 kilometers from the finish. Well, Bras is still waiting for his team car, always a problem. I saw another rider go down. It is a wall of attrition, and it is an event where really luck plays a big part. The great Roger de Vlamingh, who won this race 4 times, he actually never punctured once until the very last time he rode, which was an amazing record, never to get a flat tyre, because the conditions sometimes in which he rode and won were atrocious. Back up with Ralf Grabs, a rider who had a couple of wins last year, but really has only had 2 wins since 2002. So he's not a big winner, but he's a very strong bike rider.
He certainly is. He's decided to go on his own here, and I'm really a little bit surprised, Phil, as we see the main field's gap now at 4 minutes and 15 seconds. And really, he needs to wait, I would say, for the rest of that group, because the only chance this group have got of surviving is by riding together as a compact group. Looking back here, you can see the riders from Predictor Lotto at the front there. They're doing a fair amount of turn. Again, another problem here for Astana.
Yes, Astana just had one problem. This is now Benoit Joachim. We're normally used to seeing him in the colours of when he was alongside Lance Armstrong in Discovery Channel and the Postal Services team. Now he's switched over to Astana. And a good wheel change. He should get back into it. Former champion of Luxembourg. And he'll get back in pretty quickly, I think.
Well, Grabs has got about a 20-second advantage over the rest of the riders he was with a few moments ago. When he comes off this section of cobblestones, he's got about a 3-kilometer ride on a smooth road before he comes to the next section, which is section number 20. And then after that, Phil, he's got a long ride, about 10 or 12 kilometres before he gets to the next section of cobblestones. And I think then, if he's still only got around the 20-second advantage over the rest of that group, he'd be well advised to sit up and wait for them.
Yeah, I think the reason I can think he's attacking like this for is to try see the cobbles himself for a little way and hope that the group splits up behind. I think you might have sensed that one or two of the riders weren't pulling the weight back there, and it's time to revitalise the move.
That was Tom Steels on the front of the group. Good to see Tom Steels in the breakaway, a man who a couple of years ago I thought was going to retire from the sport. He had mononucleosis, or a glandular fever, and it took him about 3 or 4 years to get back to the man that he was before. Even now, it's surprising to see him racing in this early part of the season, because he had a dramatic crash in the Tour of Qatar in February where he actually broke his collarbone, and we saw him start to get competitive just about 10 days ago in the 3 days of La Panna.
Well, his best finish in this event, he podiumed in 3rd place back in 1999. He's been a pro since 1994. Very often see him in the champion of Belgium's colours, because he's won that title 4 times during his pro career. But those colours today not being worn by Tom, being worn by Nico Ekut instead. And as far as we know, he's back in the peloton. But there we are, the boys carving their own little path through the cobblestones here now, as they try to hold on to their lead, which is still holding actually. 4 minutes 13, 114 kilometres to go. That's about 72 miles to go. A lot of racing still to be done here today. And this is Ralph Greg, the brother of Bert, who is trying to break the field up a little bit.
He's still holding on to that 20-second advantage, and there you can just see the banner in the distance there. That's the next section of cobblestones. He's probably decided to ride these section of cobblestones just like this, Phil, because it is just a little bit safer, and there's not really on the cobbles a lot of advantage from actually slipstreaming, because you're under so much stress concentrating on what's happening in front of the rider in front of you, that you actually tend to be a lot better off riding at your own pace.
Well, this is also a counting event in the Pro Tour circuit, although it's a circuit which doesn't really capture the public's imagination. Again, it's another event without the current Pro Tour leader taking part. It seems that when you win the Pro Tour leadership, as Oscar Freire did at the end of Ghent-Wevelgem, then you don't ride the next counting event. That seems to be the way it's going this year. And it's at this time of the year when the last 2 years of the Pro Tour has been decided, because the riders who've ridden well in the spring seem to have held on right to the end. Danilo De Luca and Alejandro Valverde, the 2 previous winners of the Pro Tour, both succeeded in the spring classics, but not these spring classics. They were the ones still to come, like the Amstel Gold Race and the Liège-Bastogne-Liège and Flèche-Wallonne.
Well, Grabs has got himself now around about a 35-second advantage, so maybe he's decided he wants to ride up to the Forest of Arenberg completely on his own and try and ride into that in 1st place. He's now on the sector number 20 to go. That's a 1,600-meter section of cobblestones from Main to Montchaux-sur-Écaillon, and it's a pretty difficult section, although a lot of these sections, Phil, have been relayed over recent times, and that's because there's an organization in the north of France to conserve the cobbles. It's called the Friends of the Cobblestones. Well, they're not very friendly to these riders this afternoon.
Yes, and they work very hard to make sure these roads don't disappear. They have withstood the passage of time for 105 editions, and this is the reason why, because of Paris-Roubaix. Many of the riders complain, but they all want to ride this race, and they all want to say they finished it. Even my co-commentator Paul Sherwin seen the finish in this race, and dare I remind the viewers, Paul, you did finish 3rd in the amateur version.
Yeah, there's a big difference there between the amateur and the professional version, around about 65 kilometers difference actually. But the amateur version does use very many of the same roads as Paris-Roubaix. Just a bit of an anecdote for you. When I finished 15th in Paris-Roubaix one year, I don't remember which year it was, I actually fell off 9 times.
Well, you've got to, haven't you? Otherwise it wouldn't be Paris-Roubaix.
Well, talking to Stuart O'Grady yesterday, he said the amazing thing about this race, and one of the things he loves about this race, every one of the riders who participates in Paris-Roubaix, at the end of the day, whether he's finished or not, has a story to tell.
Well, Grab shall have a story to tell, and he'll be able to tell us why he's launched such an early attack here, going alone from such a long way out from the finish. But it's such an unusual type of race with the cobblestones. Fortunes can change at the blink of an eyelid, so it may not be such a silly option at the moment.
Grabsch now is looking at about 20 kilometers till he gets to the forest of Arenberg, and that really is an unbelievable sector. It goes back to the Napoleonic times, and it, to me, is always the sign when the war of attrition really does begin, because after that there's a section of cobblestones almost every 10 kilometers.
I must say, seeing Ralph Grabsch up front, and although he's on a rival team, it's his brother Bert Grabsch who is sitting at the front of the breakaway here, no doubt backing them off a little bit. A little bit of the family ties might be a bit stronger than team rivalry, I think, just now.
Well, on the front of the main field, it's Team Predictor Lotto doing a lot of work as they come out of section number 21 to go, and that looked like Johan van Summeren on the front there. They'll obviously be trying to get their man back into the race, because Leif Hoster is one of the big names who's missed out on that breakaway this afternoon, and he's got incredible form, and this is the chaos at the back. A lot of riders pulling off, and that looks like the champion of Hungary, and that's Laszlo Bodrogi.
Yes, and this is a puncture or a crash. I think it's a
well,
flat
he's waiting.
Tire. He's seen a teammate stop. I wonder if it's Hushoft.
Well, if he has stopped, I would expect it to be for Thor Hushoft, and Hushoft is getting a very slow change here.
Looks
if it
like
is.
him. Yeah.
That's Jimmy
Ongelvon. But
I can't understand why Laszlo Bodrogi be waiting for this teammate, because the man I think they were expecting to ride well here this afternoon was, of course, Thor.
in fact, we're just hearing now that he's getting a rear wheel change as well. So they've both had flat tyres, coincidence on the same team. And there he is. He's wrestling with a teammate who's giving him a wheel by the look of it now.
And this is the chaos, which is Paris-Roubaix. This is one of the reasons why it's nicknamed the Hell of the North, because there's so much chaos. You haven't to give up in a situation like this. You've got to battle your way back into the race, and a lot of riders will be off the back of the group for many, many kilometers. Then all of a sudden they come back from nowhere because they've just had it in their stomach to ride themselves back into this race.
Help is at hand there, Paul, because that's Joachim, who's just come up from his flat tyre, still trying to make contact. So two strong riders there getting together should get back up to the peloton. But there really is no way around the flat tyres. You've just got to be lucky if you don't get one. And if you do, you're going to have to fight your way back into the action. This is Jimmy Ongelvon. Well, you'll probably know that his teammate Bodrogi is also chasing now. So they're going to get a threesome, I would think, very shortly. Try and get back into the action. The thing is, as you know, don't you, Paul, that you know others are going to puncture up ahead. You just hope you can catch them and you can get a group together and then get back in the peloton.
Well, you just kind of hope that somebody's going to have a flat tire or a bit of bad luck about the same time as you, so you can have a little bit of company trying to get yourself back into the race. This is the leader on the road now, Grabsch from Team Milram. A little bit decapitated Milram with that nasty accident that Eric Zabel had last week in the Tour of Flanders when he went down with a lot of other riders. And for Zabel, he actually said afterwards he doesn't know how he crashed, because it was on a good piece of road going slightly downhill, and the next minute there were about 10 riders on the floor.
Yes, and poor old Eric, because I think he was in good form in the Tour of Flanders, but we'll never know what he might have done. The winner of the Tour of Flanders, Alessandro Ballan, missed out midweek, decided to save himself for a big shot at this race this year. He rode well in it last year. Top 6 finish, 50 was. And the blue skies, I cannot believe the time of year, neither can anybody we talk to here. It is such an idyllic day.
If you keep an eye out in the Tour of Paris-Roubaix, as we are here, looking down on, again, some samples of the giants of Flanders, the French Flanders, that is, you'll very often notice team cars parked at the exit to all of the cobblestone sections. Now, that is sort of illegal, but very much tolerated.
Well, look at that. We've gone out to 5 minutes 10 seconds again now, and that's because of the attack. You come back 50 seconds, of course, to the breakaway, to the peloton, because this man's getting the time at 5 minutes 10, and he's up front. In fact, that's Thomas Fulton, I think.
Well, he was in the leading group, Phil,
so I think dropped.
I think he may well have.
They're saying it's David Copper. I think they're wrong. I think it's Thomas Fulton.
Well, they were both in the group.
They're both in the breakaway, yeah.
And I would suggest that they were dropped on that last section of cobblestones, because looking up the road there, we should get a chance to see the front end of the group.
And there it is. Well, again, there's two more riders off. So the last section of cobblestones, our cameras, you see, are committed at the front, and we're not seeing what's happening at the back.
Actually, that is the leader of the race there. It's always a complicated race to cover Paris-Roubaix, because there's so much chaos going on at the front, at the back, and in the middle. But what is happening there is the rider from Gerolsteiner is actually trying to ride across the gap here to Grabsch.
Well, this is Grabsch, and he'd welcome somebody giving him a hand. I'm sure of that. as he races now towards the next sector of pavé. Still 34 kilometres, that's 21 miles of stones remaining for the riders to cross, and he's seeing the gap now. 4:40 plus 50 seconds for himself puts him over the top of 5 minutes.
Well, at a stage like this, it's very much like racing in the old era, because the race radios don't have a lot of help here, because sometimes the team managers are so far away that these race radios that the riders use in their ears have got a range of around about 2.5 kilometres. So with the team cars so far behind, the riders, I'm sure you'll agree and enjoy this, have to actually make their own tactical decisions.
Well, I do. I never agree with radios and talking to the riders when racing is underway, but tends to spoil the action, I think, sometimes. There's a rider there, something we very rarely have seen in the past in Paris-Roubaix, riders holding their hands up, more drinks required for what is the summer temperatures today. It's true that it's not just the bicycles and the riders on them who are getting all sorts of bother today. It's also the motor cars themselves. They slide off the course, they break down, things drop off they never knew were even on the vehicles. And in fact, the breakaway now is reorganizing, so they're not in any hurry at all to bring back Grabsch.
Well, they realise, Phil, in around about 15 kilometres time, they'll be going into the forest of Arenberg, and you can wipe away a minute's advantage in that 2.5 kilometres of cobblestones. An interesting point you bring up there about the cars in Paris-Roubaix, because actually the teams, they have a different set of wheels on the cars because of the shape of the cobblestones. The cobblestones are arched in the middle, and if you have the low-profile tyres on your car that most of the cars use these days, you actually find that you can bang the sump, and I've seen cars take their sump out on some of these cobblestone sections.
Yeah. Well, I've actually been upside down in one. We didn't make a corner on one of the stretches in bad conditions, and we slipped upside down into a ditch. Fortunately without injury. Just snatching the drinks there at the moment, the Case de Pan rider, Jose Rojas, who's coming back from sickness and now looking to be on good form again.
Bienvenue au Nord et Pas-de-Calais. That is welcome to the northern part of France, the department of the North, and the Pas-de-Calais, which is where Calais is and regarded by very many people as the gateway to England.
Yes, that's the department of France. Normally a very cold and windy department, but not so today at this time of the year. These are the legs of Grabsch, who no longer has anybody reaching him now, and I think we'll see his time is going to go up again here. Very strange move by him, but he continues to head up towards Wallers and the Forest of Arenberg. There's the main field, still no concerted effort at all coming from that main pack, and Broad, 131 then, has got back in after his flat tyre, so a lucky man lives to fight again here, the champion of France.
Yeah, but he'll still have a story to tell when he gets to the showers, the very famous showers here in Roubaix at the Velodrome. And if you ever get a chance to come down here, there's a small museum and cafe just at the finish line, and the showers, every one of the shower cubicles has the plaque alongside it of the winners, the previous winners of Paris-Roubaix.
And that was another Case de Pan rider who just slipped off the side. And so Brad, who's also on the same team but wears different colours because he's got his champion's jersey on. That was Viti from Spain, who's had a flat tyre.
Tom Bonan was riding at the front end of the group. And again, we can see another rider here going towards the back, and that's one of the Lampre riders. Looks like Paolo Forniciari, a massive big rider who used to, in the old days, ride, of course, with Mario Cipollini. He will be looking after Alessandro Ballan here this afternoon. And on every tarmac section of the route, these riders will be dropping back to get on board as many drinks as possible to take them up to their leaders, who will try and hold their position at the front end of the group.
Still time is gaining because the peloton is still not showing a great deal of interest in chasing this breakaway down. 5:10 now to the leader, and take off 50 seconds behind the 30 or so riders left in the bunch. I think that bunch is down, the breakaway bunch is down to about 28 men now.
Well, they've definitely lost their impetus. They were all riding very well in the early part of this breakaway, and they were opening up a massive gap. Now the main field has got it pretty much pegged at the 4.5 to 4:45, and I think they'll be quite happy with that. But they're actually currently both riding at the same speed, so we'll see an acceleration, I think, Phil, when we start to get up to that famous Forest of Arenberg section.
26 riders out front, 25 in the bunch, and one ahead of them. Here he is, Bert Grabsch, or rather Ralph Grabsch, from now Team Milram, new team for him. And while the others are watching one another, this man is certainly now going to get to the Forest of Arenberg ahead of them. And have the pleasure of listening to the crowd shout at him as he carves his own little corridor up through the woods there. Normally there's no cars at all goes up through the forest of Arenberg. It's a closed piece of road permanently, barriered at both ends usually. It's only opened up for Paris-Roubaix. Other than that, it is service vehicles into the woodlands only allowed. It's a very tranquil place on most days, but we're now looking at the imminent arrival of Paris-Roubaix.
Bram de Groot there is the rider from Roubaix who's managed to get himself into this group. Matteo Tossato has got into the group from Quick Step. Now that may well be a nice tactical move if there is a rejoining by the rear here, because he's a teammate of Tom Boonen, who every time I've seen the front end of the main field, Phil, has looked rather frisky.
And there is Bedrogi still coming back from his flat tyre we saw. And this looks here as though we've got no, it's not Cancellara, it can't be Cancellara. It's
Peter van Petegem.
Peter, I thought I could only see one, I didn't see the 7. Yes, Peter van Petegem, the past winner, of course, a king of the cobbles, and riding on Quick Step now.
A bit old in the tooth, Peter van Petegem, but he's a man who knows how to prepare himself for races like this. 36 years of age. I think one of the reasons he was brought into the team this year was just so that he could be of assistance to Tom Boonen in these 2 races, the Tour of Flanders last weekend and Paris-Roubaix this weekend. There's Fabien Cancellara moving to the front with all of his teammates from Team CSC, and wait till you see him get to the Forest of Arenberg, Phil, because I'm absolutely certain he's going to try and fly away from this group.
A little bit of hard work being done now. They're getting themselves organised again on the front. Showing no concern at all. He's just getting on with the job in hand, Grabs. He's not worried about being caught. He's just expecting to settle into a long breakaway here, but he's not going anywhere at the moment. He's sitting on that 50 seconds gap. It hasn't moved for some kilometres, so they've got him under control. There's the chase bunch. I think there's 25 riders left in that now, and while the main field is preoccupied by the continuing punctures and falls, they may not be able to organise the chase, because we have to remember 19 of the 24 teams have riders in the lead.
Yes, but a lot of those riders might not be too happy with the composition of that leading breakaway, and they've not got the right men in it. That, I think, is certainly the case with Team Quickstep, who with Tossato and Kevin van Impe there would much rather have Tom Boonen in the front of the bike race.
CSC were on paper the strongest rider in the group, but they sadly lost Luke Roberts early on. He punctured on the very first sector of cobblestones. He's now back in the main field, but O'Grady is still here, so too is Matty Breschel. So they've still got 2 very strong riders up here, and while it stays that way, I think they will chase.
On the front. Number 13, unlucky for some, Sebastien Rousselet. He's going back to the team car. He was brought in again as a replacement after a number of riders crashed quite dramatically and Gent Wevelgem them from Quick Step. But Grabsch now, Phil, has got himself a minute and 15 seconds advantage. He's just riding away, and he'll be able to ride over the cobblestones very safely on his own and pick his own way through. And the fact that there is hardly a breath of wind in the air will make it a fairly easy ride for him this afternoon.
Well, it looks as though Discovery Channel have decided to try and liven up this peloton, and they've sent their Japanese champion Beppu to the front to start setting the pace, because they really don't have a rider of quality in that breakaway to handle it today. Vladimir Bileka is the only man up there. He's a Ukrainian rider on Team Discovery Channel. They really need to close this gap down in favour of somebody like Stein de Volder or Vladimir Gusev, who are their big hopes for today. Here we go now, next sector. This will be sector 19.
The sector of Haveluy-Wallers. It's a fairly long sector as well, because this comes in at around about 2.5 kilometres. It's at kilometre 155 kilometres covered, and it's a 4-star section of cobblestones. But for this man here, you can see he's got the chance to pick his own way nice and safely. He's got the yellow motorbike there behind him. That's the neutral service motorbike, and that man is on board as soon as possible if this man has a mechanical incident. But you see how Grabsch is riding right down the middle of the cobblestones.
1 minute 15 to the chasers and 5:10 to the peloton, and still looking very confident, very strong here. Still question the wiseness of such a move. but he's obviously feeling good and responding to the weather.
This is Paris-Roubaix, though, and sometimes riders get carried away by themselves because of the excitement of this race, because every time you come to a section of cobblestones, there is a huge crowd, and that's what the riders sometimes force themselves to make mistakes, and they ride with their stomach and their guts and their heart rather than actually riding with their head in a sense. Peter van Petegem from the back of the group has moved himself right up to the front end of the main field. He knows what's coming up next as the rest of the group there start group number 19.
So we look down on the peloton, still chasing a group of 25 riders in the breakaway, a breakaway which got clear after about 30 kilometers today. It was 30 plus strong. One or two have punctured or gone back into the main field, and Ralph Grabsch, who attacked a while ago now, has got himself a lead of 1¼ minutes over that breakaway, and across the spread it's around 5 minutes and 10 seconds.
Well, once they leave this section of cobblestones, they'll be looking at around about 9 kilometers till they get to the start of the Forest of Arenberg, and every rider in the sport knows that forest so dramatically. It's been the scene in the past of some incredible images on television, and I think today is going to be the same, because as you said a little bit earlier, Phil, they've taken away the barriers from the side of the road, so the crowd will be right up against the riders, and it's amazing how all of a sudden they're able to just open up at the last moment. We're looking down here at the rider who's leading, and this is the 19th to go section of cobblestones. This is the sector of Averluy à Wallers, and this is Ralph Grabsch at the front for Team Milram, a German rider who's got himself now about 1 minute and 20 seconds advantage over a group containing some big names like Roger Hammond of Great Britain and of course Stuart O'Grady of Australia, who a lot of people are thinking with these weather conditions here this afternoon has got a very good chance of winning.
Well, looking at this stretch of road, one may ask where have all the people gone, but they'll be waiting just up the road, believe me. This is not a sector which has drawn them in any number at all. But gone are the days when we used to stand on these roadsides in our Wellington boots because of the mud, and all here to watch the riders slip and slide their way to Roubaix. Now it's just a dust storm as they get further up the road.
Stuart O'Grady there in second position, following him Tom Steels. Two very seriously experienced bike riders, and they know what's coming up next. Once they leave this section of cobblestones, Phil, they will be facing about 8 kilometers of smooth road and then the famous Forest of Arenberg. There's Matty Breschel, number 2, just going through as well. He's a teammate of Stuart O'Grady, and they had 3 riders in the group to begin with, but Luke Roberts had a little bit of a mechanical incident and a flat tire at the wrong moment, and
yes,
he's now back in the main field.
Right on the first sector of Pavé at Troisville. Man setting the pace there was David Kopp as well, a rider that's pretty well known for his riding in the Giro del Capo in the Tour of the Cape in Cape Town in South Africa. He's now developed onto a good team where he's a leader of his own. Sat at the back here is the sprinter Olaf Pollack, and I tell you, if Olaf gets to see Roubaix, they'll have a job beating him.
Certainly, he's been a great sprinter. Used to ride for T-Mobile, but moved across here as we rejoin dramatically Grabsch. And this is a little bit of a queuing up to get around the corner. Again, this is why you have to ride at the front end of the group. Having a bit of a problem there at the back was the big, tall man from Team Predictor Lotto, Bert Roosem.
Yeah, and also the Belgian champion was brought to a standstill there. Ikut just about getting himself rolling again. But those crowds on the left-hand side of the road should have known that the riders always take the shortest way. Right, well, is that off the sector or onto the sector 19? Just entering 19.
Yes, this is the main field now, entering section number 19. And this is the back end of the group, and as you can see, everybody's on there. There is the Belgian national champion just in front there of Bert Roens. But the dust is going to be the major factor here this afternoon.
Well, we're looking at the main field here. We're looking at the breakaway here at the moment, still being driven on by CSC as they hit over the cobblestones again. It almost looks as though it's covered in dirt rather than stones at the moment, but in fact they are stones covered in dust.
Very dusty Paris-Roubaix here this afternoon. There's a lot of confusion in the race, a lot of the riders trying to find out exactly what's going on. And all of the riders now thinking in the back of their minds just how important it's going to be in around about 10 kilometers time, because that, Phil, I would guesstimate we're around about 15 minutes from going into the Forest of Arenberg.
Well, as we look here at the leading group, it's a minute 15 to the one man who's out in front. He left this group a while ago now, Ralph Grabsch of Team Milram. The peloton are further behind and still losing ground at the moment. And all of the big names really, with probably the exception of Stuart O'Grady and Roger Hammond, they are the biggest names in the breakaway. All of the others are sooner or later going to have to make up their minds as to when to commence the chase. We're approaching the forest of Arenberg, and once we get there, then I think we'll see some sort of a reaction. There will be a splinter group, I think, get off the front. This is the leader here, Grabsch. He'll be first to Arenberg.
He'll be 4 kilometers away from Arenberg right now. You can see this is the main field now, tackling that sector number 19 to go. It'll be interesting to see just exactly what happens. You see a bit of panic there, just at the back there. A rider has had a flat tire. It's one of the riders from Quick-Step. That's Wouter Weiland.
Yes, and they can't afford to lose too many if Tom Bonen really has got ambition today.
It's a slow change as well.
It's a very slow change, but he's away.
I've got a funny feeling that will just be one of the team mechanics who just happened to be there by accident.
So this is the leading group here. They are just chasing one man at the moment, with the peloton still having to work out quite what to do.
Well, the main field, you can see who's keen on getting the gap reduced now, because Team CSC, even though they've got Stuart O'Grady in the leading group, have decided to whip up the pace at the front end of this peloton. In second position there is Fabian Cancellara.
Yep.
And he, I think, Phil, once we get to the forest of Arenberg, he's going to really test out that turbo, which we saw flying last week in the Tour of Flanders. But you can see the main field is stretched out into a very long line. They've got 6 miles once they come off this section of cobblestones to go down to the forest of Arenberg, which is an unbelievable forest of Arenberg. And today I think we'll see some phenomenal sights, because there's a huge crowd there waiting for this race to arrive.
Well, there's plenty of coal in this district. It's no longer mined, but there's plenty of old coal heaps around. You'll see them. And in fact, the forest of Arenberg is run over the top of a famous pit, which you'll see as we enter the forest of Arenberg. I think it's now a museum. The former world champion, Jean Slabinski, he always makes a smile when he claims to be the only man to have raced over the top in Roubaix and to have worked underneath because he was a coal miner.
A great bike rider, and he's still around. I raced with his son, Jean Stablansky, for a couple of seasons as well. They're moving out all of the cars now, Phil, because they know, even though he's got a gap of around about 1 minute and 25 seconds, they know that what we're going into in the next kilometre or so is absolute chaos, and 1 minute and 25 seconds is absolutely nothing at all in the famous forest of Arenberg.
Oh, and there's the coal mine I was telling you about. That's always the first signs that we're on the doorstep of the climb of the road itself, which has a small climb on it. 31.7 kilometres of stones left to go, and we're now bound for the forest. Bathed in sunshine, the chiff-chaffs are singing in the forest today. The people will be shouting and the riders will be clattering.
And not too far away from all that chaos, you can actually find wild boar in that forest of Arenberg too. And you know now that this group is going to lose a number of riders in the forest. And all these riders now starting to wonder with trepidation about what lies ahead, because they've all been and ridden the forest of Arenberg. They know what this section of cobblestones is like, and they know that in the past it has always been absolute chaos coming into it.
Setting the pace on the front as they go in is Roberto Petito, as they made the right-hand turn, but nobody seemingly willing to chase this man down. But once they're onto the cobblestones, it's everybody for themselves. It's a real battle. They'll go simply as fast as they can, and there might be another group form when they come out the other side, but I certainly feel today we're going to see a reshaping of the race. And I think the peloton will try to get rid of some of the weaker riders once they get into the forest.
Just going back to the peloton, in fact, now a very quick glimpse there of Liquigas on the front end. They were trying to whip up the pacemaking, and this is what it looks like at the back end of the group. And you can see a lot of these riders now are starting to scramble just to stay on the wheel in front of them.
Well, the British rider Steve Cummings just out of the back here, world track champion, riding his first season with Discovery Channel and loving every minute of it, and getting his first taste today of Paris-Roubaix and the hell of the north. he ain't seen nothing yet.
Johan van Summeren on the front here in the pink and black jersey of Predictor Lotto. If you're wondering why he's keeping looking round like that, he wants to know probably what the position is of Leif Hoster, second last week in the Tour of Flanders, but looking to try and get some redemption here in Paris-Roubaix. We're in now to the town of Wallers and not very far away from the start of the famous Tranchée d'Arenberg.
A long straight before we crash through the entry point of the forest. There's a nice view through the old mine here. No longer a working mine, but I think it is a museum, as we search among what were the former miners' homes here, the entry into the forest.
A lot of people from Poland moved to this part of the world, and so we look a little bit forward right into the final meters now before we go into that tranchée. If you can see those trees just in the distance there, if you're a professional bike rider, once you know, you look across to the left-hand side and you see the headgear of that mine, you see those trees in the distance. Now you can see the bridge across the road. That's where the cobblestone section starts.
And that's where they jump out and bite, because once we're under that disused railway bridge there, we also go over a used railway line. And then we start up the... It'll be interesting, because we haven't seen how big the crowds are yet. We know they'll be big, and we haven't seen what effect the removal of the barriers will have. So we're going to find out now. This is the first railroad crossing, thankfully up, because of course remember that last year the railroad crossing actually caused the disqualification of 3 riders just before the finish. That of course still lies ahead of us just yet. Lots of people here. They've had a bit of a party here. They always do. The tents go up the day before the race arrives. It's a great atmosphere. The teams come and train down here 2 days before the race does it. And now we're over the railroad. Happily the gates are up. And we're into the first section of the cobblestones, which really bite when we get under this old bridge here. Now it's barriered here. Now is it going to be barriered all the way up? It looks to me as though they may have put them back again.
Well, we'll find out when we get a little bit further down. This is an unbelievable section of cobblestones. It could tell us a whole lot of stories, not only about Paris-Roubaix, but also about the Napoleonic Wars. That's the forest of Arenberg all around the riders. What a magnificent sight.
Absolutely beautiful. A little oasis here in what was the middle of a big mining community. Well, they've obviously had second thoughts here.
Well, actually, it's only barriered on one side.
Yeah, it's on one side, so they've kept it clean on the left because it made it just a little bit too narrow. And they've obviously tried to get the public to queue on one side. That hasn't worked.
Well, you can see now this man is starting to bounce around over these cobblestones. He's zigging and zagging left and right to try and find at least a little bit of a smoother road through here. Look at the vibrations coming up from the cobblestones right through his calf and thigh muscles in his arms. The day after Paris-Roubaix is an unbelievable feeling because every muscle in your body, even the muscles in the hands, are absolutely in pain.
Well, there's the cars. Just the chief referee and one service vehicle behind. It'd be nice to get back for when the peloton hit the cobbles here today. Crowd a bit down at the moment on what we normally see here in the forest. Maybe they've chosen other sites to watch the race. It looks quite a big crowd at the entry, as now the breakaway is about to start the journey through the forest.
I should think we'll lose a few members of this breakaway group here, Phil, once we start to come down this.
Oh, the bells are ringing now. Is that the crossing coming down? Oh, that's down here. I'm sorry, everybody. They're ringing the bell down on the stadium here. We're commentating, of course, from Roubaix Velodrome. I thought it was the alarm bells starting to drop the crossing gates. Bit nervous after what happened last year. 4.5 minutes the gap, 93 kilometres to go.
Well, there's no real acceleration yet, Phil, and that's a bit of a surprise for me. I think everybody now has decided they're probably going to get caught. The group is a very large group, down to less than 30 riders. 1 or 2 neutral vehicles allowed to come behind the riders at this point. As we rejoin Grabsch at the front, and you can just see how bad these cobblestones are. They are very bumpy cobblestones, and because this road is not used very much at all, there is also an awful lot of grass in between the joints. So Grabsch is bouncing around quite a bit here. He's got the red car up behind him. That's the car of the race referee. Next man moving forward, this is Olaf Pollack, and I'm not sure if he's in the front or the back of the group. He was in that group of about 28 riders. You can see he's trying to get over right to the right-hand side of the road just to find a slightly smoother trajectory.
Exactly, he's on the sharp end. He's trying to get away from him at the moment, Olaf Pollack. There's his teammate who's also in the group. That will be Gajek. As the riders now just try to pick their own little path here, but this is not changing the shape of things, at least in the breakaway at the moment, as they continue to keep the pressure on. You have to take your hat off too to the skills of our motorcycle cameramen here, because they have to endure the same situations as the riders and still keep those cameras focused and rely totally on the pilot of the bike.
Well, you might look at the time gap there, because the time gap between that group of chasers and the peloton is now starting to reduce. It's only around about 2.5 minutes, so they're seriously whipping up the pace in the peloton.
And strangely, it seems to have been done by Team CSC, despite the fact they've got Stuart O'Grady in here.
Somebody's got a problem there. I think that was Stuart O'Grady.
It's Stuart O'Grady, and I think he has a flat tyre the way he's dropping down to the back of that group.
I think it was a rear flat tyre, because you could just see the way the back end of his bike was moving. Now the main field is into the Forest of Arenberg, and this is a completely different style and a completely different approach.
We're looking at the riders now as they crash over the common cobblestones of the Forest of Arenberg. The peloton now driving on the gap, which was out to 5 minutes, is now in reality only a couple of minutes behind the second sector of the front breakaway. And that they are now working very hard, and surprisingly, it is the Lotto Predictor team there who are driving the pace. Back up to the front, and this is the leader, Grabsch.
The whole of the main field now is in exactly the same section of cobblestones, the Forest of Arenberg. This is Grabsch, who's about to make his exit from the cobblestone section and get himself back onto the smooth roads. He's got that group behind him, which is starting to split up a fraction, but the main field were charging into this cobblestone section. They realise how important it is.
Yes, Ralph Grabsch here about to turn to his left as he comes out now. It's all over for the moment. He'll get some more very shortly as he turns now and races down a good stretch of main highway here. But Grabsch, I think, living to his greatest moment, because I do think there's been a big change of attitude at the back here. Now there is the CSC rider, and there is a fall right in front of them, and that's the start of the ricochet effect now, as one after another. Oh, that's a nasty fall over the top of those two riders, and I think it was all due to the CSC riders changing tyres and still struggling.
That was
Cancellara
Cancellara
got a
who
flat
was
tyre
panicking
on the
there
right.
with a flat tyre. This is chaos. The problem here is there's not a lot of cars. There's a rider gone over into the ditch on the left-hand side. That was Beppu, I think, of Team Discovery in the Japanese national champions jersey. There's another Discovery rider there trying to figure his bike out. This is the Forest of Arenberg, and this is why this raceville is called the Hell of the North.
It's a Chocolat Jacques rider, who went over into the ditch there, but now this is the chaos we're leaving behind. Because I think that was caused by that wheel change to Cancellara on the right, where a teammate stopped to help him and stood in the way of the oncoming bunch. That's a bit of a shame.
Well, a lot of riders now will have a story to tell. And these guys, I don't think, will be seeing the finish line in Roubaix now, because they're going to be at the end of this cobblestone section a long way behind. This is the style of Stefan Weissermann of Team Wiesenhof. Used to be for a long time one of the strong men in the classics for T-Mobile. Decided to move across this winter to a different squad, and it's still very difficult, despite seeing him since the start of the season in this green jersey, actually getting used to it.
But his style is unmistakable. He's a superb classics rider, even now when he is not quite as good as he was. But Steph is now trying to move across as best he can here. He's had his moments in Paris-Roubaix. His best finish, he was runner-up in 2002. He's desperately disappointed. He thought he was going to become the first German to win this race since Joseph Fischer first won it back in 1896.
Now this is the style of Tom Bonen. He's also the spearhead of the front end of the main field too. He knows this section of cobblestones, and he's a good man at riding over them. He's got, it seems to me, the ideal body weight and position to glide over the cobbles. He really is a powerful man. He's been down a little bit on his form, but he's had so much pressure on him, Phil. After all, he's only 26 years of age, and he's won so many races throughout his career. I mean, he was the world champion last year, and this year he's already won about 8 races.
And he spoilt the big day for George Hincapie as well just a couple of years ago, when George could have won this race but for Tom. But Tom Bonen now trying to fight his way back into the picture here, and he knows he's got to start, the foundations have got to be laid here in the Forest of Arenberg, because now the cobbles come thick and fast, and you watch the crowds will also grow, because from this point they can all get through to other sectors of cobblestones by using the freeways, and also get through to the finish in Roubaix. Lots of feeding stations. There must have been a lot of maps out last night with the directors sportifs planning where they were going to hand all these bottles up. And Bonen now wants to pull a group clear that can work with him to try and get up to those leaders.
Looking over,
more help required.
He's looking for these guys to start riding and working. Nico Eickhout, the Belgian national champion, he's come to the front here. This rider from Rabobank also having a flat tyre.
Well, I've got a feeling the rider from Rabobank there was Leon Van Bon. It looks like it was.
Yeah, it was Van Bon.
Is he on the wrong side of the barriers?
Well, he's decided to take the advantage of riding down the smoothest section of the road here. Not sure that's totally legal, but I'm not sure the referees will be able to see that.
I'd be more concerned about how he gets on. He might be able to get back through the gate there. And this rider here, Arlen Kemps, the Australian on the Russian Astana team, or the Kazakhstan team, looks as though he's called it a day in the Arlenberg Forest here because he was slipping right out of contention. These riders have all been in problems. Eric Baumann was the German T-Mobile rider who's also had problems, and that was Van Bon.
Chaos here. If you have a problem here, Phil, you ain't getting back into this race at all, because you're going to come out of the Forest of Arenberg having lost yourself a good 2.5 minutes.
And there's another wheel required for Lampre. It wasn't Ballan, that's all I can tell you. I didn't quite see him quick enough. But it wasn't the style of Ballan, it was too small for him. Meanwhile, the pressure on the front now, the face of Johan van Summeren there. This big man that has such tremendous power is in second position here just now.
Bouncing away. He's trying to pull his man.
Look at him go.
He's trying to pull his man back into the race. The man for Team Predictor Lotto here this afternoon is, of course, going to be Leif Hoster.
Yeah.
See the front end of that group. For this next section here, there's a lot of scrambling, trying to pull themselves back into some form of organization, because there's only around about 6 kilometers between the Forest of Arenberg and another section of cobblestones, which I've always regarded as a very tough section of cobblestones, the Pavé of Wallers. There was Van Petegem and Tom Boonen. So they were comfortably at the front of the group.
Boonen's going to be pretty happy. He's got Van Petegem on his side this year just now. He needs some extra help, I think, because this breakaway trying to stretch himself into action.
Martin Elmiger there for AG2R, the winner of this year of the Tour Down Under. Boonen just cruising up the outside there, looking very fine this afternoon. The other rider up there from Predictor Lotto was Roy Sentjens. So Predictor Lotto have actually got a number of riders in this group.
There's Nikut rather, stretching at the back there, Van Sevelens. Sector 17 now. This is the Pavé de Wallers. This is quite a nasty little stretch. This it's 1,600 meters. It's 4 stars. They grade them. 5 stars is the worst, and this is a 4-star sector. Twists and turns a little bit.
Well, at least it's dry today, because this road actually twists to the right and then goes through what used to be a railway track, which has now been removed, which is known as the Pont Gibus, named after Gilbert Duclos-Lassalle, who won this race on 2 occasions. In the wet, this is a treacherous section of cobblestones, because they're the blue granite cobblestones that are very slippery indeed.
I have to say that so far Ralph Grabsch is riding absolutely superbly, because he's avoiding all of the problems behind. His riders are having plenty of them. We're not too sure now as to where Fabian Cancellara really is, because he had his problem right at the entry into the Wallenberg Forest, and now he's going to have to fight his way back up through the field. Kevin Van Imp there, the quick-step rider in the leading group.
Well, I would say now, Phil, we're looking around about a 1.5 minute gap between that group and the front end of what was the peloton a few moments ago, which now contains a large number of favourites. There's Nico Eickhout, Peter Van Petegem in the blue there, Tom Boonen looking nice and relaxed here this afternoon, maybe just
cool.
Getting rid of all those bad memories of the Tour of Flanders from a week ago.
Very, very cool. I also caught a glimpse there of Magnus Bankstedt in this group as well, which is a former winner, the only Swedish cyclist to have won it. Lives in South Wales in Great Britain. And now we'll see, and he's ahead at the moment too. And also up here, wearing number 62 is Bjorn Lukemans on the Belgian riders in there as well. So this is becoming quite an interesting little group that they've got themselves organised here. Just trying to see if we can find if Leif Hoster is in there. We think Cancellara has made the split. I haven't seen him, but we'll keep an eye out for him. And this is now the workhorse department. This is the engine room of Paris-Roubaix, I think. They're now, they've got rid of a number of riders on the Forest, and now it's time to get into the work and see if they can catch up to that leading group. Then we'll see a whole different face appear on Paris-Roubaix, because Boonen is in this group. Ralph Grabsch for the moment is riding with no knowledge of what is happening behind, other than he can probably guess that the field is chasing and will have split on that passage of the Forest. Again, Wiseman riding dead centre of the pavé, so he can see the holes, and riding it pretty quickly as well. Sitting here at the back is still Kevin Van Imp. This is the chase group. I don't think it's going to be long now before we see the riders connect with them. We're waiting for official time, guys, but you can imagine that in the chaos, all our timekeepers get split up as well, as do the cameras and the cars, and it takes a little while to reorganize them themselves. But there's when the course switches back once we get out to the main road here, sharp left. And this is where certainly some of the crowd have gone to today, because just off to the right is a small freeway where they can jump on and get further down the course and see the riders coming back across that freeway. Another railroad crossing, gates are up. I think there are 8 crossings on the course today. It's become a big talking point after the disaster of last year when the referees disqualified 3 riders for going through the closed gates. There was no train, but it was only seconds away. It was a very dangerous manoeuvre. That was the Pont Gibus, or the Gibus Bridge. It used to have a railroad across the top of it in the early days, but now that's been taken away. Cancellara is in this group. He wears number 1. Lars Mikkelsen is in there as well. And also there is Tom Bonen, we've seen. Van Petegem is alongside him. Juan Antonio Fletcher is up there, and we think that Leif Hoster is there too. And I think that's probably true, because otherwise the Predictor Lotto riders wouldn't be riding quite so hard on the front. So it looks as though the majority of big favourites have won the first split in their favour. And this rider is going to have company sooner or later, bet on it. 85 kilometres to go, about 53 miles to race. Still plenty of cobblestones lie ahead, including the really bad sectors. Grabs wisely, just riding within himself. He's not riding in the red zone. He's complete control of it so far. Enjoying a summer's day. It's the first time he'll have ever got a suntan rather than a windburn out of Paris-Roubaix, I'm sure of that. The winner of the Tour Down Under in Australia has also made the split, Martin Elmager. And the champion of Belgium, Ecourt, and we've already seen Magnus Bagstedt. There's some of the names we know now are in that chase group, trying to make contact with that 30 or so main breakaway.
Well, it's all starting to come back together a little bit after those 2 very difficult sections of cobblestones there, Phil, because the group is only about 40 seconds behind that lead rider. And that group contains, they're saying that Stuart O'Grady was still in there, although I didn't actually see him in the group.
Well, it looked very much like O'Grady dropping back on the forest with a flat tyre, but
it's always difficult to spot from the helicopter.
It doesn't help. The gap would now coming at us, the complete spread between the lone leader back to the Boonen chase group, as we'll call it, is 2 minutes 55 seconds, and they're only a minute behind the remnants of that breakaway, so they're coming quickly now.
They certainly are starting to come quick. We're getting into a very repetitive. Well, that's Breschel there. And there is, looks to me as if there is no other CSC rider in this group. So obviously it was Stuart O'Grady who had the incident there. He's going to be caught in no man's land, but very shortly he'll probably get picked up by his teammate Fabian Cancellara.
Stuart is a very canny bike rider. He knows now once he's got a flat tyre, at least he got a wheel without being left behind, apart from the leaders, of course. And he knows that group now is coming up. So he'll just wait for them and he'll slip back in. And no damage should be done at the moment. This is Julian Dean here. He was in the breakaway. So he's going back to the main field, or the Boonen bunch, and here they come. Is this the breakaway we're looking at just now?
No, this is the second group. This is
Sorry,
a group
he's
of
going
Tom
back
Boonen.
into the second group. This is Boonen's group.
Yeah, this is Boonen.
Right.
That's Johan van Summeren on the front there, and he's working like this because he knows that his man Leif Hoster has made the split. The Forest of Arenberg once again has been very decisive here in the Paris-Roubaix, because it has made the first selection of the day. 1 or 2 riders may well get themselves into a small group and clamber back to get into this group, but they will have had to put in a very hard chase to stay in contention.
Well, Julian Dean, who's a sprinter from New Zealand, is the New Zealand champion at the moment, has got back into that group, so he's come back from the lead group. That lead group knows now the proximity of this chase group. They'll also know the quality of the riders within. And we've already said that Cancellara is there, and Tom Bonen, Van Petegem, Fletcher, all of those guys possible winners today. We're now heading into the stretch from Ornang to Wandigny. Stretch of, this is a long one, 3.7 kilometres of cobblestones. That's going to hurt. It's nearly just over 2 miles of cobbles now.
These are a very long, difficult section of cobblestones, and you can see there the rider just around the corner. He's not too far in front of the group, and the whole of the race really now starting to pull itself back together. I was a little bit worried a few moments ago when the gap was announced at 5 minutes and 5 seconds, but all of a sudden the Forest of Arenberg has made this race a little bit more serious, and it's pulled the whole of the race completely back together. The leader, Grabsch, now he's had his glory of going through the Forest of Arenberg, and he's decided, well, that's a lot of fun. I've enjoyed it. I've been at the front of Paris-Roubaix. I think I'll go back to the group and have a rest.
Common sense prevails at last, I think. He's going to be picked up by the remnants of that chase group, which was the original break of the day, getting away at around 30 kilometers. And he chose to break clear on his own, about 10k or so before the entry into the forest. He's going to go back into the chase group, and then that puts the peloton chasing at 2:55, and it quite likely is slightly less than that right now.
Well, Grabsch is now just sitting up, cruising a bit. He will have taken on board a little bit of drink, a little bit of food to make sure that he can keep his energy levels topped up nicely, and he'll try and sit back in that group and recuperate for a fraction. There's nothing really like recuperation in a race like Paris-Roubaix, because every time you come to the cobblestone sections, the pressure is on. You have to try and recuperate and eat on these smooth sections in between the cobblestones.
I must say that the breakaway, though, this year has had a definite effect on Paris-Roubaix, because that original break of some 33 riders has caused a reaction from the peloton, which is a very small group indeed, and a very select group. And we're probably going to see 60 riders come together in the next 15 minutes or so. And as we see now, this is David Kopp, I think, who's come up.
But there's no organisation in this group, Phil. They're going to lose themselves an awful lot of impetus, and unless somebody takes the responsibility of riding hard over these cobblestones, they're very quickly going to see the return of that group with all of the big names of the favourites moving into it. It is David Kopp who's realised that in a kilometre or so there's another section of cobblestones to go onto, and he now is looking for a little bit more glory as well for Germany. This is the power station, which used to be fueled by coal not too far away from Wallez, Ornain. These guys are certainly, to me, Phil, I think these guys have actually, they've given up a fraction, I think, because of the fact that it's such a large group. And in fact, that's the second group on the road, because that was Nico Eekhout riding at the front.
They're still flying at the moment. Try to reorganize. They'll be behind these two groups. There'll be absolute chaos as riders believe they will still be able to catch up with this group, hoping that they might slow down to reassess the situation. But this is a very strong group now, and that could be its downfall for the moment, of course, because most of the favourites have got into the move, and so there won't be seen as a lot of point to push home the advantage just yet.
I think Team Lotto are the team that are very keen to whip up the pace-making here. They're very content, I think, with the position in this group of their man Leif Hoster. There was Julian Dean, and somebody's pulling off here.
And O'Grady was on the front there too. He's taken
Tom Steele's
back up control at the front. Poor old Tom's had a front wheel puncture now. 4 times the Belgian champion. Once third in Paris-Roubaix. And now having to get back on with it. He was up in that chase group with Tom Bonen. Now can he actually get back into it? David Kopp has been the lone warrior now. He's taken over from Grabsch at the front. Grabsch on the Milram team. David Kopp rides for Gerolsteiner. Very good sprinter. And safely over another railroad crossing, or what they call in French a passage niveau. Hits this stretch of cobblestones, which can be quite bad in places here, and it kicks around a little bit.
It certainly does, and it's a fairly smooth section. Once the riders get up to those 2 water towers there, they'll take a turning to the right, and then you've got about 2.5 kilometres of cobblestones. Fast and smooth cobblestones, nothing too dangerous for the riders at this point, but the dangerous thing is the distance, because there's 3.7 kilometres linked together here as the riders go onto this section of Ornain-Wadigny.
And again, another large crowd here on this section of pavé. Seeing a German rider show his colours here.
This is just a fraction of respite in the middle there. There's a little bit of smooth road, only about 40 or 50 metres. Looking over his shoulder as we zigzag through the Flanders here, he can always get an estimation of how far behind him the group is. Poor old Tom Steele's happened to have a flat tyre just at the wrong time, but I think Steele's has got enough enough tactical knowledge and enough professionalism about him to get himself back into this group, because the hammer really isn't down that much, and this is the main group here. They seem to have actually backed off a bit. There's Nico Eickhout, I think, riding very well in his champion of Belgium jersey.
He's riding exceptionally well. He won 13 races last year, but he's not a man for the big occasion. He's won lots of races, but we don't see him scoring highly in these big classic races. Well, he's in the move right now. And this is the group we're actually looking at, which was in the helicopter. There's still a little bit of work being done here as they race onto the cobblestones again. Predict or Lotto. Well, I think somebody should tell this rider, his teammate Tom Steels, he's chasing to catch up before he rips apart at the front. So the big disadvantage, if you're caught in the centre of these bunches, you don't see where the cobblestones are broken or the holes which cause the crashes. So you've got to rely that the rider in front of you is taking the absolute correct line and just trust him, because you can't see round him. And very often the vibration is such, a helmet slips over your eyes, your glasses drop off, things jump off your bicycle you never knew you ever had on. I've known gears fall off, chains snap, gear levers break, because they really do take a pounding.
The main group now, the group that contains the majority of the big favourites we talked about before the race, and again it looks like there's a problem there for Quickstep at the back, and that was number 15 going there. That was Matteo Tossato, and he was actually in the leading group a little bit earlier on.
So he must have got sent to the back group, and now he's had a flat tyre. There's no justice in the world, I don't think, today for some of these riders. And this is the problem at the front here, being caused by this tall rider from Lotto.
This is the front end of the main group with all of the contenders, which, as you can see there, Phil, looking down, has actually swelled a little bit since we left the Forest of Arenberg just a few moments ago. This is the front end of the race now. David Kopp, now you see how quickly they've nailed him back, and you can see one or two riders jumping over to the left-hand side, just trying to get a little bit of respite from this bone-shaking cobblestone section here. This is the longest section of cobblestones, by the way, in Paris-Roubaix this year at 3.7 kilometers.
This looks like Roger Hammond on the front here. Very familiar pattern of riding style for Roger. He's riding superbly. He lives in Belgium for most of the year, near Brussels, and then spends some of his time back home in Britain. And he speaks the language, the Flemish language, almost fluently, and he's very much appreciated in Belgium because of it. Now, although we are on French roads, when the race gets to the finishing line, you can drive into Belgium in about 15 minutes. So there's a massive amount of Belgian support for this race. Still a glorious day. Still the sun behind the riders now as they race towards Roubaix. This is Van Summeren setting the pace at the front. No, it's Roy Sentjens, which means that we're up with the other group, and this is Koen de Koort here also for Astana now. These are in the best place to see the cobblestones.
They're riding off the front end of the group with most of the favourites. I'm not quite sure of the sense of Sentjens' move here, because in this group behind him he has got the man who is looking to win the race this afternoon, Leif Hoster. Down at the group here, they haven't yet put the hammer down. I think we'll have to wait now until we get a little bit further down the road. We've had the first selection at the Forest of Arenberg, which is an important section, but you can see the race has slowed down a little bit. There are riders recovering and coming back from behind.
Yeah, that group is noticeably bigger now. I think there was just nobody missed the move, and that's why the race hasn't pushed home the advantage. All of the protracted favourites had made that decision, so there wasn't anybody to leave behind. So it looks as though they've stopped racing for the moment. We might see this breakaway group start to gain time again as Sentjens and de Koort try to bridge the gap. There's still a long way to bridge.
We're looking at around about a minute and a half, but there wasn't a lot of pressure on in that group. We're coming off at the front end of the race now, the section of cobblestones number 16. So again, the race is still pretty much on the same section of cobblestones, the right-hand bend here. They will now face up to a ride of about 7 kilometers on smooth road. And it's always a very strange sensation once you've had your body pounded on a section of cobblestones like that and you come onto the smooth section, you start to look down at your bike because your bike actually doesn't feel normal. It feels as if the tires have gone soft.
This is not vibrating, and neither is the body for a few seconds. That was Erkki Putsep, the champion of Estonia there, in the colours which look very similar. He's in his championship colours of Estonia, but it looked very similar to Discovery Channel colours. And taking a bottle. Yes, they're definitely reassessing the situation, which often happens about this point in Paris-Roubaix. Still riding very strongly on the front. It's got the style of Stuart O'Grady. I think he might have got control of the peloton here to try and get Cancellara back into the action.
There's a Predictor Lotto rider up there in second position, right behind him. Another Team CSC rider. There's a problem there as somebody's flicked across to the left-hand side of the road, lost a little bit of momentum, and then decided to look for the smoother section just to try and keep the speed as high as possible.
In fact, it's Lars Mikkelsen, seeing him from the front there. He's riding his last bicycle race today, and he's going to go out on a high by the look of it. Another rider limping to the back here, Sebastian Chavanel, a bit of a surprise.
Also having a bit of a hard time. It's a bit of a surprise to see him riding this race, because not really the sort of race that suited him. Maybe he came here to look after the team leader, Philippe Gilbert, who I'd have to say is probably the most Flemish of all the French-speaking Belgians.
He is, and he's also in that main favourites pack at the moment. He was also marked as being up there, so he's done his job if that was the intention, to get him into the move, but he's hanging on a bit now. They're off sector 16. One minute 50 as we speak now. The gap between the Boonen group, which is the group we are looking at, and the leaders, it's a 1 minute 50 seconds. They're saying 1:54 on television, but we're probably a little bit more accurate because we're hearing commentary from the race course itself.
And that was Boonen not far from the front there, just over on the left-hand side. A lot of people say that he is probably one of the best riders in the main field for being able to ride along the cobblestones. Put him up alongside Fabian Cancellara, whose teammates all believe that he has the perfect body style to ride well over the cobbles. To ride well over the cobbles, you have to have a combination of not only strength but suppleness. There's Stuart O'Grady as well, just adjusting his earpiece, so he is back in the main field. But he will have had a nice, gentle ride through the forest of Arenberg. He wouldn't have had the stress of fighting to get position, to get into a good place in that tranchée of Arenberg. So for Stuart O'Grady now, I think he will turn around and try and look after his own teammate Fabian Cancellara, who I think he has an awful lot of respect for.
Well, O'Grady himself is a magnificent professional cyclist. He's such a strong bike rider, but he's a great race reader. He's never afraid to get up front and give it his strength. And there he was working overtime in that breakaway. Then the luck changed. He finished up with a flat tyre. So now he's doing the same for his team captain back in this chase group, which is slowly but surely bringing back that leading group. There's been a slight hesitation. They seem to have gone through that sort of void, and now they're getting on with the job of catching up. A little bit more service call at the back here.
Florent Barre, the French national champion, still there. He finished in the top 10 in Paris-Roubaix on a previous occasion, and I think today he'll be looking to try and ride well. He's had his own share of bad luck. Had a flat tyre at the wrong moment, but still had the courage to ride himself back in after a mechanical change.
Well, the man from Lampre with his hand up was Fabio Baldato, who has been a professional since 1991. He's 39 years of age now, or he will be in June this year. So Fabio's had a tremendous career, and he still enjoys his cycling.
He's finished on the podium in the Tour of Flanders on a previous occasion, and one of the main reasons he was brought into this team was actually to almost be the pilot fish for Alessandro Ballan, a younger rider on his way up at 26 years of age, and showing us just what he's made of last week by winning that incredible race, the Tour of Flanders.
Just in case you've forgotten, yes, the sun is still burning down on the riders in Paris-Roubaix in the month of April, when we've sat here and shivered with every piece of clothing we could muster. We are now with short sleeve summer shirts on, and the temperature is probably the top end of the 70s Fahrenheit just now, which is around about 24 degrees Celsius, which around the world it's hotter than places in Australia, it's hotter than places in South Africa, and we are in northern France in springtime. The riders, one of their biggest problems today is seeking out water and keeping their liquids topped up. Because of the dryness of racing over the cobbles, the dust is in their mouths, they're getting dry mouths, and of course they've really got to stay on top of the hydration problem today, because this is a long race in extreme conditions, 260 kilometers, and it's been a good race so far because the breakaway has shaped a different type of Paris-Roubaix. There's another puncture. Now, is that Bagstead? I think it might be. It looks like Magnus Bagstead has had a flat tyre, the winner of 2003.
He didn't panic at all there. He stopped at the side of the road. The team car was right behind him when he stopped. He's getting not a very quick time change. I'm not sure what the problem is for the mechanic there, but that's taken him pretty close to 20 seconds to change that, but he's up and he will have the advantage of being able to get back into the main field using the convoy of cars behind.
And a couple of riders who are coming up on his side. I think there's a few more riders there. So Magnus, you just don't need problems like this when you're under pressure. He's done everything right so far. He'd read the Booner move coming off the cobblestones. He was one of the first riders to it, and he's looking for a good ride. He's been hampered by injury for a couple of seasons. He's never been able to really show his true form since he last won this race.
This is Matty Breschel now at the front end of the main field. He's now entering sector number 15 to go. That's 2.4 kilometers, a 4-star section of cobblestones here. And this is the section called Walang.
One minute 55 is the latest time check now from the group here to the leaders. So they're holding them just for the moment.
See these guys at the back now starting to look just a little bit ragged.
This must be quite a serious move here, because Peter van Petegem has felt it necessary to start driving the pace, and clearly then he's not feeling like a winner of the race today. He's thinking of his teammate Tom Bonen as he tries to keep them in touch. There's Maggie, as everybody calls him, Big Maggie, trying to get back onto the group. He's looking very powerful today. He's 32 years of age.
He seemed pretty confident yesterday as well. You know, he's a rider who through the passes also had his fair share of injuries and illness, but this year I think he just might be getting himself back onto form just at the right time. And when he won Paris-Roubaix a couple of years ago, that was one of the best rides of his life. 73 kilometers to go to the finish. Bagstad, winner of a stage in the Tour de France, and if you remember when he crossed the line there, he almost scared us with the yelp of delight.
Yes, he did, and 2004 he won Paris-Roubaix. He finished 4th the following year, so that wasn't a bad defence of his title, to get back up there again and prove that that win was no passing fluke. And so since then, though, he really has been bothered by back problems and all sorts of problems that kept him in and out of hospital. He's never been able to have a long, full and complete season. He hasn't actually won a race since he won Paris-Roubaix, so the time is overdue.
The main field are taking this section of cobblestones fairly seriously. In about 10th, 12th position there, you can see the black, yellow and red jersey of Nico Eickhout, the champion of Belgium. Champion of France is in this group as well, in the red, white and blue. And a number of riders in this group as well for Team Discovery. It looks as if Gusev was in there. He's a rider who was right up in the group that was sprinting out for 2nd place last year, but unfortunately they'd gone through that rather famous railway incident and they were disqualified from the race, which I still find to this day feel a little bit of an unfair decision by the referees.
It was a tough one to take, I must say, a very brave decision. And the cameras, and we will never know if in fact the guy that won, Fabian Cancellara, should have also been disqualified, because the lights were flashing. Even if the gates hadn't actually come down. But that's all in the past now, and it's all in the annals of the history of Paris-Roubaix. Here comes the next edition, edition 105. Everybody who believes they can win, all the favourites we thought of, are in that chase group and are slowly bringing back the leaders. They may want to hang off a little bit longer. 1:57 now. 73 kilometres still to ride, and plenty of 5-star cobblestones awaiting them.
Well, if Team Quickstep have decided to come to the front and put the hammer down like this, that's an indication that Tom Boonen is on form this week. There's been a lot of discussion about Boonen over this last week. They're saying that he's not having his greatest season, he's not riding well, he hasn't got the firepower that he's had on previous occasions. But the way his team are riding here, Phil, I think they've got confidence in him.
Just trying to get a little glimpse of the cobblestones there. Art Vierhouten was the rider who was slipping off the back of the group, the Dutchman, now riding for Skill Shimano as he rides out his long career. Speed they're driving now over the stones. You get some idea from our camera by just how quick these riders are clattering over these stones. They know that the boys at the back will be in all sorts of agony and more trouble here. This is the Astana champ, so this will be Rast, Gregory Rast, who's got a problem, champion of Switzerland.
And again, it's very difficult for these neutral service mechanics to get the wheel in, because they never have the wheel properly adjusted for the rear of each bike, because each bike has a slightly different rear lug at the back, which could be different by at least a millimetre.
Sector 14 at Tilloy now brings us up to 2.4 kilometres of cobblestones. Wiesenhof on the front. The rider from Wiesenhof will be Gajek.
On the main field now at 1 minute and 40 seconds as they left that final section of cobblestones. It's slowly but surely starting to come back together, and we've still got a lot of very difficult, very dangerous cobbles before we get to the finish line. I have a feeling that this early morning breakaway that looked as if it was going to turn the race upside down is not going to have its taste of glory this afternoon.
Not yet. 70 kilometres though still to go. 1 minute 40. They are coming back, and all of the big boys are in there as far as we know. And Predictor Lotto are now driving this in favour of Leif Hoster, the rider who got second place for the 3rd time in the Tour of Flanders. Actually stayed in the same hotel as us the next day, and he was getting plenty of congratulations for second, and why not? But he was disappointed. He wanted to say he'd won that race on one occasion.
It's Leif Hoster riding there in 3rd place, and that's to rally the troops around him, to show them that he's in fine form this afternoon, and just to give them the encouragement to ride that little bit harder. He did used to ride for Team Discovery Channel. There he's talking on his race radio there to the team manager to try and figure out just exactly what the time gap is. But that group, Phil, you will see is actually split a fraction because there are no cars behind it. There's a small group of riders who were tailed off the back because of the pressure on that last section of cobblestones.
It will continue to be applied here because somebody left the door open at the back of the peloton, and now somebody else is going to have to try and close it. But that's quite a big group that they've got rid of there, and it should lose further ground now. They've gone on to that section of cobblestones of 2.4 kilometres, and that gap will probably open a little bit now.
Well, it wasn't the right time to just open up the gap there, and this looks like it's Leif Hoster himself who's come to the front now to decide to try and open it. This is a very difficult section of cobblestones, this, Phil, a long section of cobblestones. And in fact, I have to take my memory back to remind you that this is actually one of the sections of cobblestones that I fell off when I was in the winning breakaway when Henny Kuiper went on to win. But on that occasion, it was a little bit damp.
I remember you could hardly recognise the riders, never mind a little bit damp. They were covered in mud from head to toe.
It's a 3-star section of cobblestones here, but they certainly are now putting the hammer down, trying to put the gap between themselves and everybody else. Hoster now is picking up a couple of riders. In fact, he's picking up Tom Steels here, his own teammate, and he's gone by. And I wonder if he had time to just shout to him there and say, Tom, have you got any power left? But no, thank you very much. He's got on his wheel a CSC rider as well. And I can't tell you who it is from this altitude.
I think it looks like the shape and size of Lars Mikkelsen again, but we'll find out shortly. The rider also there going back with Tom Steels was Iriondo from Euskadi. And there is the spread now as the cobbles cause a little bit of problem for one or two riders. This is a sector which has often brought about accidents. And that's Lars Mikkelsen saying it's Fabian Cancellara. Well, does it look like Fabian Cancellara? Well, they've obviously got it from somewhere. If that is Cancellara, then that is going to cause total chaos in the chase behind, because Cancellara has got a tremendous turn of speed. World time trial champion, gifted with natural speed, and once he gets up there, he can hold it.
This is close to guard from Team CSC. He's going backwards right now, and the other man going backwards there as well is one of the riders from Team Wiesenhof. Leif Hoster has decided to go very far from the finish, and that's something that Cancellara, Phil, said that he wanted to do. He wanted to move a long way from the finish line. They've got themselves a fairly good gap, but there's a long line of riders chasing to try and pull them back, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Tom Bonen not very far away from that. The gap, though, has reduced dramatically with this acceleration to 1 minute and 10 seconds.
And I'm still not convinced that is Lars Mikkelsen, as we always thought. It was a wrong caption. His hair's a bit too short for Fabian's. So that'll be a different face on the situation, I think. But Mikkelsen, who retires today, is trying to go out in a blaze of glory. And I think his own team would help him get it if he could do it.
Well, he's twice finished 5th in Paris-Roubaix in the past. He loves this race. You have to love this race to come here and perform every year. And it is Tom Bonen on the front there who's decided to nail them back. So Bonen has taken control himself, and he's right on the back of that move by Leif Hoster.
He's paying attention. He's feeling confident at this stage of Paris-Roubaix. There's Cancellara, about 5 riders from the front man. And I think O'Grady's still hanging on in there, but that group has thinned rather quickly.
Very dramatically. We're still on that very long section of cobblestones. This is the section of Tilloy à Sarthe. And after 6 kilometers off the end of this section, the riders go into that next very difficult section of the Pavé de Orchy.
Well, this is a plan by CSC. They knew that section of Pavé was coming, as did Leif Hoster. And he has now caused a nice split here. Until we get down there, we're not sure who is in there. They are saying 1 minute is the gap, and I've got a feeling that Vladimir Gusev has just joined the back of this group, the young man who's being talked about as a real superstar to go. Now look at this. Boonen has done a great ride to reach them, and he looks rather upset they've slowed down like that.
Yeah, well, they've slowed down because they're going through a feeding section. Everybody who needs to take on board drinks. It's very hot this afternoon at around about 25 degrees Celsius. There are 21 riders in that group with Cancellara and Tom Bonen, but I think, again, Phil, it may well swell a fraction because I think they will slow down once they've seen that hardly anybody was missing out.
Just the big check on who's on the train before they decide whether to make it an express or a stopper. 21 riders are left in the front group, where Radio Tours just told us. So that group of 133 is down to 21 riders. Is this Stefan Wessermann again? Yes, it is. As he looks over his shoulder, another workhorse. What a great leader of this new Wiesenhof team he is. New to him, not new to the cycle racing, by the way. Here's the feed.
Important now to take on board your bag at this point. Now that we're getting into the latter part of the race, these bags will mainly be containing liquid and probably gel carbohydrate drinks for the riders to keep themselves topped up with as much energy as possible, because once we go into the latter part of the race, these guys can't really take on board very many solids.
They can, but the chances are they'll finish back on the road and jumping out of their pockets. Well, that was Bert Grabsch on the front for T-Mobile. Just putting on the food bag here is Greg van Avermaet. He's the young boy on the block who's been in the breakaway all day. Got his first pro win in the Tour de Qatar in the first week of February. And it's probably as hot here today as it was in Qatar back in February as well, but there's no sand dunes around yet.
No sand dunes, no camels, although they are going past one of the most famous stud farms in the north of France. That's Tom Steels. So this is the front end of the Tom Bonen group. It's good to see Steels riding so well.
A synchronized musette putting on of the bag by the look of it just there. But Tom Steele's done very well to get back in the action after his flat tyre. He is also riding very well. Had a very bad crash in the Tour de Qatar. Broke his collarbone badly, and he's just coming back. He only started to come back this last 10 days. He looks very sharp.
He rode very well in the 3 days of Lupana, and he wasn't too bad either in the Gent-Wevelgem race just in the middle of last week. Just looking at that group of riders now, the separation between the leading group of riders and the main field with most of the main contenders in it is down to a mere minute. In fact, it looks a little bit less than a mere minute to me.
It does, it looks, but they've both sat up. It's feeding time at the zoo now. The boys are all having a rest in both groups while they just load the food and drink out of those little musettes or bags. And then they'll be off to the souvenir hunters. Here's the former champion of Belgium, 4 times former champion of Belgium, Tom Steels. There's O'Grady, third wheel. There's the current champion of Belgium with the black top to his jersey, Niegoet. Just checking out who has come back into this group. He's on a high today. He's having a great ride. And it looks to me as though Milram have also got Brett Lancaster, and he's still in this group.
Well, it's good to see Brett Lancaster riding so well. He's a rider who I've always thought was ideally suited for a race like Paris-Roubaix. He's a big, strong rider, can ride with an incredible amount of suppleness because he's come from a very good background pedigree on the track. Stuart O'Grady, who was in that early morning group, now win this group, will be looking after Fabian Cancellara, who's never going to be too far away from him, and he's right there on his wheel.
That's Lancaster in the blue. Former world record, well, he's the current world record holder in the team pursuit with his 3 teammates, and riding a great ride today to be in this group. 45 seconds and closing now as they move up towards the leaders.
Coming up to another difficult section of cobblestones at 65 kilometers to go. The next section of cobblestones is the Pavé of Orchy, and the actual name of the road is the 2 roads linked together are the Road of Prayers and the Road of the Abattoir.
And that was Hoster who has gone through just behind, in front of Putsep, the champion of Estonia. Interesting that this group here now, they're just checking out who has missed it, and there's 1 or 2 riders. I didn't see Gusev actually when we just went down. Didn't see many riders from Discovery Channel at all, and there was a lot of riders in there from the Predictor Lotto team, so they've got plenty of cards to play in favour of Hoster right now. Back up with the leaders here.
These guys, I think, Phil, they certainly have they've shut down quite a lot here. You know, I think team orders may well have prevailed here, and orders gone up to the riders in this leading group to say, especially the riders from Quick Step, riders from T-Mobile might also have been given the order as they now move into this next section of cobbles. This is the section number 13, which is Beuvry-La Forêt.
First man on is Bert Grabsch of T-Mobile. He gets to see him first this time. The only other T-Mobile rider left in the breakaway is still Roger Hammond. Tough man that he is.
The new section of cobbles they've actually thrown in, Phil, because he used to in the old days go from the section of Tilloy right the way down to the section of Orchy. So this section has actually been rammed in between, just to make it a little bit more difficult.
Excellent idea. Couldn't be more in favour. Look at the face here now, Grabsch, as he drives through that new section of cobblestones. And there, go slow on the highway, you see, as they all try to catch a glimpse of the Paris-Roubaix passing through this sector.
To be the only country in the world where they can actually turn a freeway into a parking lot, especially when a race like this goes by.
Absolutely.
And the police basically, they just throw their hands up in the air and say, well, there's nothing we can do about this. There's too many people to give tickets to.
This is Franzoy of Lampre, who's now in front for the Rico Franzoy.
This is again a very difficult section of cobblestones. After this, they've got a 5-kilometer section of smooth road. The gap just down now to 45 seconds. Again, the Giants of Flanders out on display here this afternoon. These Flanders Giants go around to all of the festivals in the north of France and the southern part of Belgium throughout the year. So again, we can see this acceleration, and this looks to me as if we're trying to rip the place to pieces.
Well, there's still a lot of fight in these riders at the moment.
I've seen that guy with the yellow anorak on about 15 times. I think he's been getting around the course here to hand up the drinks.
He's had his maps out. There's the Australian flag as well. There's plenty of Australians leaving a lasting mark on this year's Paris-Roubaix.
This looks like Matti Breschel is now making the acceleration from the front of the group. Again, a long section of cobblestones. This has been given just a 3-star rating. It's 1.4 kilometers long. This is the Tête de la Course. You'll notice at the end of every cobblestone section, Phil, there's 1 or 2 team helpers there to try and pass on board wheels to the riders. The orders go out. It's not completely legal what they're doing, but it is it's accepted by nearly everybody because most of the teams do it. That if you have a flat tire on the section of cobblestones, you try and ride to the end of the section of cobblestones on the rim so that you can then change your tire where that you know that the mechanic is waiting.
That's true, but the rim, of course, is not much used after you get to the other end of the cobblestones, and that's another few £100 or dollars for a new wheel. Well, we're hearing now 36 seconds, so they're almost on here. And we're not getting the pictures because they've been maybe being chased out of the space with the cameras, but the gap now is nothing, absolutely nothing, about 400 meters.
It's Lars Mikkelsen again ripping up the pace at the front end of the group. He's trying to set something up for his 2 men, Fabian Cancellara and Stuart O'Grady. They've got around about 3 miles of smooth now, riding up down towards the next cobblestones of Orchy. Just looking through the riders in this group. There's number 13. That's not a very popular number for anybody. That's Sebastian Rousseler. It's almost as if, Phil, they're waiting to pounce now as we come into the outskirts of Orchy. They took a little deviation off the road to take in that section of Beuvry à Orchy to come back into the town of Orchy for the next cobblestone section, which is that section, the road of Prez and the road of the Abattoir.
Well, this is the catch of the Gerolsteiner rider Thomas Foden here, who was in the leading group and is now about to go back into the main chase group. So he's got the strength left, of course, got the chance to go back up to those guys he's just left behind. Well, to me, it looks as though he's had a pretty tough day in that leading group.
I think everybody's had a pretty tough day this afternoon. There'll be a lot of tales to tell once they get to the showers after the race. But now I think we're in a situation we're almost in limbo, waiting for the next phase of the race to happen, because I think everybody in that group now realizes they can catch that leading group of riders or the remnants of that early morning breakaway at any time. They may well want to try and do it on the next section of cobblestones, which again itself is a pretty long section of cobblestones. It's around about 1.7 kilometers.
Still 36 seconds according to the race radio. So both the groups have slowed down a little bit here. 61 kilometres, about 38 miles or so to race through to the finish. They're saying 40 seconds. I think a little bit of a truce just before it's the calm before the storm.
It certainly is the calm before the storm. The next section is a very difficult section of cobblestones. It's broken up by a small piece of tarmac, and somebody's decided that now's the time to move.
This is the reaction once again, and the leaky gas rider making the move here has got to be Roberto Petito, by my guess. He wanted to liven it up again.
He's an experienced bike rider. He knows what's coming up next. He knows that he's within a kilometre of the next section of cobblestones, which he's decided to try and get onto himself in the front alone.
Chase group here. One Discovery rider is up there in second place, but I don't see any others at all. The riding style of Stein Bavarian. I think they might be the only Discovery riders who have made the split here at the moment.
And Stuart O'Grady there in third place. He's riding very comfortably as well. He was in that early morning break, and he was only robbed of his position in that breakaway because of a flat tyre on the long Forest of Arenberg section. He's still looking fairly comfortable. O'Grady, I think, in probably some of the best form of his life at the moment.
He just hasn't won any races for a couple of years, apart from one small win, as he calls it, when he became champion of South Australia in January this year. But really, he's knocking on the door of a huge victory, Stuart O'Grady. He keeps on getting seconds, thirds and fourths. He's so consistent. It just needs a little change of fortune and the wins will come.
This is David Kopp from the leading group trying once again. They're zigzagging through the outskirts of the industrial part of Orchy. They've got a section now of about 600 meters of smooth tarmac surface before they take that very dangerous right-hand turn onto the road of Prez. There's a crash here. Now who's gone down for Lotto?
Oh, that's a shame, because Lotto had a lot of strength, those long thin legs. I hope it's not. It looks the way he's fallen, he might have hurt his collarbone here. Is it Van Summeren or Van Severen? Van Summeren, I think.
He went, I don't know how he went down there.
It's Johan Van Summeren. Could have been a great basketball player, this man. I don't know what happened there. We really don't.
It's just the chaos at the back. I think he'd gone back to get bottles. He's holding his arm there.
Yeah, I thought he'd hurt it rather badly, but the way they pulled him up by it, I presume it wasn't his arm at all.
It's another group here. Now this is the possibility
of this
group.
Hit that sign that he's actually standing by. Anyway, he's an extremely strong rider, and that's a big loss to Leif Hoster.
It certainly is. We're looking now at the front of the group. This is the main field containing most of the favourites, just slowing down a fraction, I think, before the restarting of hostilities when we come into the cobblestones of Orchy. And here they are. This leading group now has started the road of Prez.
Yes, this is it. These are the leaders here. Kevin Van Imp is the rider. The other riders up here, David Kopp and Arthur Gacek. The Wiesenhof rider is there. I'm pretty sure it's Gacek and not Olaf Pollock.
Well, Quick-Step are a seriously motivated team whenever it comes to Paris-Roubaix. You know, since I think since 1994, they won this race on 8 occasions. Not exactly always the same team name, but the same team structure, whether it be Mappé, whether it be Domo Farm Frites, or whether it be Team Quick-Step. This has been their race. On a number of occasions, they finished first, second, and third.
Just looking at the little split, trying to get off the front here at the moment. Being driven on there by leaky gas rider. I think it's Roberto Petito. But the main chase, that large group on which Johan Van Summeren unfortunately just crashed out of, is 30 seconds back of this group, trying to get back onto terms a little bit.
Very dusty conditions here. The ideal place is to ride right at the front end of the group. This is the section number 12 to go, a 3-star section. Cobbles of Orchy, 1.7 kilometers in length. There's 2 sections really joined together. Once they come off this section, they take a left-hand turn for about 50 meters on smooth road. Then they're onto the road of the abattoir. But you can see the dust is the major problem here this afternoon. It's been very dry. It's been a very warm week for the classics, when normally we're subjected to rain and snow.
Well, the dust isn't as bad as I imagined it might have been. Even so, the roads are pretty dry here. There's been no rain in the region for some weeks now. And they know it's on the cobblestones where they make the most progress. And this is a tremendous piece of pace making here. They pull that peloton into a long, thin line as they start to fly over the cobblestones. There's the 3 leaders down to the right of our picture.
Gap's gone up again because of that slowing down in the town of Orchy. It's up to the 1 minute mark once again, and I think it'll yo-yo for a little while until we decide in the main group there just exactly who wants to take the race by the horns. This is coming off this section of cobblestones with Kevin Van Imp, David Kopp, and Polak is the other rider who's managed to get up there from Biesenhoff.
It's an interesting move by Polak. Man that carries quite a punch when it comes to a sprint. He won a stage of the Criterium International this year. These riders are committed but not fully committed because they know what lies ahead. They know this can't be a winning move yet, and they're waiting to see if the others are going to take an interest and rejoin, and they're just doing enough. That's why Polak is looking over his shoulder, just seeing what's happening. Well, what he'll see is the chase is coming back.
Just looking at the group here, they're not too far behind, but again,
that has thinned out, Paul. That group has been halved on that last stretch of cobblestones.
It's a very strange race for the moment because this group, they've got it in their mind now that they're going to get caught, so they don't want to use too much energy, but they haven't been caught because the main field hasn't yet quite turned up the gas. So we're seeing the race will go apart and come back together and go apart until finally we get to a long, hard section of cobblestones, and then we will see, I think, a definitive selection. Again, this is Lars Mikkelsen. He's decided here to keep the pressure on a lot on this section of cobblestones. Peter van Petegem is actually at the back of this group there. You can just see Tom Bonen with his World Championship bands on his sleeves there. He's looking rather good too.
Well, to the 3 front runners now, they're looking at 65 seconds the gap to this group here, being led by Tom Bonen. And Kevin Van Impe is Tom Bonen's teammate in that leading 3 riders.
Kevin Van Impe is the nephew, in fact, of the former Tour de France winner Lucien Van Impe. But these guys here have got themselves, you see, this is a very strange situation. They've got themselves a gap, but they're looking over the shoulders because nobody wants to work.
And Tom Bonen getting a bit frustrated by the tactics, I think. It's going to take a decision sooner or later to go for it. But at the moment, it's status quo. Lars Mikkelsen setting the pace again now, giving Tom Bonen a hand. Bonen will be pleased about that because Mikkelsen's team carries Cancellara as the possible winner. It's a little bit interesting that Bonen himself is doing a lot of work here in this chase group and not calling on teammates. Having said that, I'm not sure how many teammates he's got left, but he certainly has Peter van Petegem.
Well, if you've got a teammate left at all in this breakaway, that's the man to have, because Peter van Petegem has got more knowledge of this race, I think, than any of the other riders in this breakaway group here. You can see Bonen, he's completely frustrated here. He really wants to go for it. He wants to race, but he's not getting any help from anybody else in the group.
That is the chase group down there. The actual leading chase pack behind the 3 now is only about 16 riders strong. So we're going to see stragglers coming back to this main peloton. There we cross that freeway again. Still the car's going slow, just trying to catch a glimpse of the race passing over the top. Back out into the country in search of more cobbled roads before they'll swing back over the main highway to Paris. Stuart O'Grady bringing them around the corner now, giving Tom Bonen a hand. This rider never gives up, Stuart O'Grady. He's just such a great bike rider.
He's very comfortable. He's looking back, Tom Bonen, here to see what's the situation, what's the makeup. He's also looking to try and figure out what the faces of these other riders were. There's Stefan Weissemann moving forward. Here is the winner last week, of course, of Tour of Flanders, Ballan, going through.
He's the big danger today, I think. Alessandro Ballan. He trained specifically for these Belgian and French early season classics. And he's one of the few Italians who really settles into the country and loves riding on the cobblestones. And surely the weather this week being so fantastically beautiful and warm has got to help the man from Italy. He came to the fore, won a great Tour of Flanders, chose not to ride midweek Ghent-Wevelgem in Belgium, and now here he is hoping he's back on form. Tom Steele's just going through on the inside. Fletcher is up here. Maggie Backstead looks as though he's made it back. I'm not sure where this group is, though.
A lot of nervousness in this group now, Phil. Everybody's, I think, waiting for something to happen. They're trying to get the bit between them. A lot of these guys now in this group, they want to race, but they want to race with the right combination.
Well, that's Brett Lancaster. So this is a group that's been split off and has been recharged by the arrival of Magnus Backstead. There he is, who chased back. That's not him, but he's in the group. And they are now hopefully going to rejoin the Boonen group with a bit of an effort.
Well, I think that little signature there, the sign of somebody putting his hand up, was a sign of goodbye. This again looks like Lars Mikkelsen trying to ride off the front of the group. He's going absolutely crazy today.
Well, this is a tremendous piece of riding, but Lars has just come into the chicanes through that town and gone for it. And he's now going to try and bridge on his own here. Well, this is going to cause Boonen to have to react, which is exactly what the CSC teams want. O'Grady will stop working now, so too will Cancellara. And it's the big man who's going to have to try and repair the damage.
And let's not forget, in front, in that leading group of riders, they've also got Matti Breschel. They're trying to play the tactical game here because there's only one leader, I think, for Team Quickstep, and that, of course, is Tom Boonen. So now they're trying to put him into difficulty and maybe try and isolate him just a little bit later on.
Well, this is an extremely active race at the moment and a very difficult one for the riders to read as to which moves to go with, because slowly but surely this race is fragmenting across the northern French countryside. There's an attack by Lampre. Looks like Lampre anyway. I'm not sure whether it's not Balan, I don't think.
This is looking very complicated because everybody here now is starting to throw caution to the wind, and strangely enough, the moves are actually going on the smooth sections of road, not on the cobblestone sections as we would normally expect. There's a rider coming across in a dark blue jersey. I think that was Peter van Petegem.
Well, that would be logical because Boonen was doing a lot of work earlier and Van Petegem was watching and waiting. Van Petegem is the man for Paris-Roubaix. We're just questioning whether he still has the condition to win this race. He might provide with a big surprise.
Well, he's a rider with a lot of class. He's 36 years of age. We're zigzagging about all over the place here. This is another group of riders trying to move off the front. It's like Juan Antonio Fletcher now starting to move forward.
And that, in fact, is Sebastian Rossler, the rider from Quickstep.
Fletcher's the man in the orange jersey with the blue shorts of Rabobank. Coming up to the next section of cobblestones. This is section number 11. And again, a very long section of cobblestones, 1.2 kilometers in length. This is the section of cobbles called the Bercé.
Rossler just nipping onto the grass and getting off it pretty quickly. You never know what hides in the grass that bites the tyres. This is the small group just behind here.
So everyone's getting a bit tired now. I don't know if you just spotted that rider there from Cofidis pulling his hand out. Is Tristan Valentin. He's a French rider.
He's done well. He's been part of the breakaway all day so far. This is the group that might be first to see the breakaway today if they keep this up. Bram de Groot.
Bram de Groot, I think he may well be coming backwards.
I think he
was
be
in the
because they
breakaway
lost 7
early on.
riders, Paul, on the last sector, and there were, our cameras are just trying to pick out riders. These are the remnants of the breakaway, which are absolutely in no man's land at the moment, and they'll shortly get wiped out by the main chase.
Breakaway was not that far away. I made it around about 40 seconds there with that small group halfway across the gap. But that is the group that contains most of the favourites now. And if you look a little bit further ahead, the race is starting now to come back to being pretty much all together.
Still a little bit of work to be done here. And Lars Mikkelsen has started the trouble. He's a rider who is retiring from the sport today. And wouldn't it be tremendous if he were to win Paris-Roubaix? And he's quite capable of it. His best classic victory was Gent-Wevelgem a few years ago now. But he still rides with a lot of strength and talent.
Once these guys come off this section of cobblestones, Phil, they've got around about 5.5 kilometers to ride before they go on to the new section of cobblestone, which has been relayed at Mont-Saint-Pavel, known as the section of Marcamadio. And a lot of the riders are saying that section of cobblestones is almost as hard as the Forest of Arenberg.
So off that latest sector of cobblestones, still Mikkelsen riding.
The second group on the road, Mikkelsen looking over his shoulder there, looking for a bit of help. But this is, again, this is just making the race a little bit tactically complicated. There's the front of the race. and it's not too far away from pulling this all back together. The rider in there from Lotto is Bjorn Lukemans in the pink and black jersey on the front. Juan Antonio Fletcher just sitting on the back there. He's a rider who has always ridden well in the Northern Classics. Considering he's a rider from the Spanish Peninsula, he really does feel at home up in this part of the world.
Well, here's 4 catching up with that little group in front. Rousseler is the quick-step rider going through. Number 62 is Lukemans. Fletcher, and a lot of work being done by Lars Mikkelsen, who looks over his shoulder and says, come on, we've sat at the back long enough now. Come and do some work at the front. And here comes the bridge.
Well, they're about to bridge up to the remnants, and let's not forget there's still a small breakaway off the front with Kevin Van Impe in it. It's always a complicated race, Paris-Roubaix, because there is so much going on from every different group on the road. So this is the leading group of riders now. That's Kevin Van Impe there in the dark blue, David Kopp in the pale blue of Team Gerolsteiner.
These are the 3 leaders: Van Impe, Kopp, Pollock, 2 Germans and a Belgian.
Pollock has been a great winner throughout his career. He's 33 years of age now. Won the first stage of the Criterium International this year, and that was in rather wet and treacherous conditions. He's won 42 races in his career, but this would be a big coup for him. He's moved down to Team Wiesenhof, which is not one of the big Pro Tour teams, having been for a number of years on T-Mobile.
Well, they've integrated with the back of the group here, but it looks as though somebody scooted up through on the inside. I think it might be Sebastian Rosselard, who's gone through to try and liven up the chase. They may not be aware there are 3 riders still ahead, although I think they probably are.
They'll still pretty much very quickly find out what the race situation is, because they've got teammates in the leading group who will tell them exactly what has happened. But that leading group now full of 3 riders has in fact got themselves a nice little advantage of 55 seconds.
And the boys who've just joined look as though they're going to take control of the breakaway now and try and liven it up a little bit. So they've got through on the inside there. The gendarmerie going through. You notice that they use special motocross motorcycles instead of the normal freeway motorcycles, and they get over the field a bit quicker and the bad roads. They only bring them out for Paris-Roubaix.
The group has swelled again because of the slowing in this group. I think now we'll probably see very shortly the group of Tom Bonen coming back to this group, and then we'll have a big race when we come up to the section of cobblestones at Mont-Saint-Pével. A lot of the riders, though, yesterday, Phil, was saying that to win Paris-Roubaix today, because of these weather conditions, you actually had to play a waiting game, because there would be so many chances for riders who had incidents to come back. You needed to wait, and probably we may well see the move not actually come until we get to the Pavé de l'Arbre down towards the end.
Well, that'll be interesting. David Kopp here giving way. He's 28 years of age now, Kopp. He's won 14 races in his career. His 28th birthday in January. Very ambitious rider, but then he had that rather spectacular crash in Milan-San Remo, and he's only just coming back to fitness now, so it looks as though the rest may have done him good, because he's actually mixing it, having a great race today. There's Kevin Van Impe.
His father is actually Frank Van Impe, who was a professional as well, raced very much as a Kermes rider, but he did participate on the Tour de France on 2 occasions. As we get into this new section, it's a section that's been around for a long number of years, but just recently it's been relaid in a number of parts. This was always a very bad section of cobblestones. This would probably be the worst section of cobblestones if it was wet. So I think today, Phil, at 3 kilometers in length, we're pretty lucky that it's dry.
It's a long one at 3 kilometers. And this is the section which the crowd used to always flock to, and looks like they've come back here. Inside 50 kilometers, just on 30 miles left to race to the finish at the moment. 3 riders in the lead. None we would talk about as being a favourite to win Paris-Roubaix. But if somebody like David Kopp or Olaf Pollock won, they wouldn't be seen as rank outsiders either. They're quite very, very good cyclists. Kevin Van Impe here got youth on his side a little bit. And he's obviously got real talent, otherwise he wouldn't be riding in the colours of Quick-Step, because Lefebvre, the manager, wouldn't take anybody who didn't have real talent.
It's a fair number of years since Paris-Roubaix has been over this section of Mont-Saint-Pével. And again, it's one of those cobblestone sections which goes on for a long period of time. Then they have to take a right-hand turn, and it then drops down towards the town of Mont-Saint-Pével, and that's where it's very dangerous. But fortunately for the riders, it is dry here this afternoon. And this is the section of cobblestones which has been named after Marc Madiot, the French two-time winner of Paris-Roubaix, who in fact just last week was assigned the Légion d'honneur.
Yes, well done, Marc Madiot. I've just heard on Race Radio that Tor Hushoft has just caught up with the Boonen group as well, so there's another sprinter now hit down. Been a long day off the back for him, but he's got back. This is Olaf Pollock sitting here for the moment at the back. It's a big result for Wiesenhof. It's a small team.
Team that got in on a wild card, let's not forget.
That's true.
And they were very happy to get into these races, especially Stefan Wesemann, to be able to participate in these races, being as they weren't members of the exclusive club of the Pro Tour, which is a Pro Tour club of 20 teams.
Olaf looking across the fields there to see if he can see where the chase is. Well, here they come. I don't think Van Summeren sadly continued, so they've lost a lot of drive, predict or Lotto, at the front of the group.
This is the second group now, because that was Lars Mikkelsen. They're making the right-hand turn there, and that, in fact, that little acceleration has split the group there. In fact, this is a very dangerous section here because it's actually slightly downhill, so they'll be touching speeds in excess of 50 kilometers an hour on this section of cobblestones. Just have a look at that. You can still see there's a lot of grass coming up through these cobbles. This is the section that's 3 kilometers in length at Mont-Saint-Pével, and it's ranked a 5-star classification.
A real bone jarrer, and this is going to split the field, I think. Meanwhile, this is life at the front with the press and television all around the three leaders, who are still looking very good. Pollock is doing nothing at all in this breakaway. He's sitting third man all of the time. It's Kevin Van Impe and David Kopp who seem to be doing the big share of the work. Now that's the corner which invariably in the old days of Paris-Roubaix, when it rained every day, is covered in flood water, and the number of riders who fell there.
Well, in fact, I was just going to remind you of another story about my fall on this section of cobblestones. I crashed on this section of cobblestones for the 9th time, and I decided I was going to stay on the floor. I wasn't going to get up anymore because I was fed up. And the crowd just came in from the side of the road. They picked me and the bike up as one and pushed me off, and I kept going again just for them, and I got to the finish line in Roubaix.
And they probably thought you were very ungrateful when you never said thank you.
Well, I went back the next day, but they'd all gone.
Oh, dear. French flag at last. We've found it in France. We're mostly Belgian so far. Gap of 36 seconds is to the first chase group. And here they are. 46 kilometers to go. Sooner or later, the big boys are going to have to wipe these gaps out and get back into the thick of the action. At the moment, they're not doing that. There's still a little chance here that this breakaway may succeed. It's a tenuous one.
There's a lot of big boys in the group behind, though, want to try and pull it all back together if they can, because Tom Boonen's still looking for the win. Leif Hoster's also looking for the win. And let's not forget, Fabian Cancellara has got a very fine pair of legs on him here this afternoon, and he can bridge a minute's gap, I would say, on any section of cobblestones still to go. And we've still got a couple of 5-star section of cobblestones. The most difficult, I think, is the 4th to go, the Carrefour de l'Arbre. That is a question of just riding for survival. If you've got any power left at all, that's the place to make the move.
Well, Kopp here seems to be using every bit of power he's got at the moment. 14 wins to his credit. He had a good result last year in Gent-Wevelgem when he finished second. Oh, and there's a faller there as they went round the corner. That was the first man down. That was Stuart O'Grady who hit the deck. Unlike Stuart to lose his wheels, he's up pretty quick. Just a slip on the mud, well, on the dust.
Well, not too far away from him was, of course, Tom Boonen, but he went around that corner in 2nd place. A lot of the riders saying as well, Phil, that despite the fact that it's not muddy today, this race is also made fairly scary and precarious by the fact that there's a lot of sand on the cobblestones here, and that makes it pretty slippy too. This is Lars Mikkelsen.
Oh, what a great ride he's having in his farewell race. He's really riding superbly, Lars, today as he comes off that sector's 10. About 5 or 6 riders with him, so he's ripped away from the main field. As a rider there has gone into the crowd, I'm not too sure what happened. Oh, he's gone right into the crowd line. It was an optical illusion. I thought he left the course. Well, Lars has left this group and dragged a few riders clear with him. So again, the race is starting to change face.
You know, this is going to be a very difficult race down towards the end, because the way these guys are going now, I think the heat is actually having a fairly serious effect. This is probably the hottest day of the year so far in Europe, and for many of the riders, they always worry about that happening, because it's the first time of the year that the body has to change and get used to racing in the cold. Although the weather was good last week in the Tour of Flanders, we didn't really go above the 20 degrees Celsius mark.
No, we had that ice in the wind, but that's all gone now. This is a summer day. I mean, there's no question about it. And they're telling us it's the hottest day that Paris-Roubaix has ever experienced since it started in 1896. Joseph Fischer of Germany won that race, by the way. Champion of Belgium, Eekhout, coming through nearest camera. I note now he's unzipped his complete tunic there and trying to trap all the air. They're riding like they would ride in the Tour de France with the zips down at this stage of the race.
Quite amazing to see this temperature, and that's, I think, what's going to make it a rather strange race over the last hour of racing, because it will be the rider who's looked after his food and drink the best who will actually come up with the goods towards the end there. The rider who's still fit, the rider who's still got that little bit of energy left in his legs. If you've not been eating and drinking properly throughout today's stage, you'll actually blow up at the end.
Well, just look at the faces of these riders. They are really struggling now. That dust, you see, is flying about a little bit. Little chance for a few deep breaths and smooth road again as they come off sector 10, as this is a chase group now that was split off earlier. I must say it's very hard for our television director to know where to send the cameras to, because the riders are actually fragmenting all over the race route just now. But these, be assured, are the three leaders.
Well, to cover a race like the race we're witnessing this afternoon, you probably need 15 moto camera bikes. We've only got 3, so we've got to keep them running around all over the place just to see exactly what's going on. This is Juan Antonio Fletcher just taking on board a drink there, and the rider from Team Liquigas who's up there alongside him is Roberto Petito.
He's been riding very strongly in this breakaway, and not a lot to show for it at the moment.
Gressel got his hand up now, waiting to see whether or not he can get a drink and take that on board.
And somehow Ralph Grabsch rather, of Milram, number 83 in there, the rider that was on his own for a long way, is still in this group and still looking to help out. He's going through at the moment to take the pace. There's the gaps for you. 32 seconds to the group we're looking at, and 1:35 to the Bonen group, which also contains Cancellara.
That group has lost itself a little bit more momentum, and I wonder if this is the big move here today by Team CSC, because they've got the sort of move that they would be happy with. But Team Quickstep also can ride on the defensive, because they've got Kevin Van Impe in this leading group. We're now looking, Phil, at a rather precarious situation, because we're 43 kilometers to go to the finish, which is about 26 miles of racing, or theoretically about an hour in the saddle.
Maybe they've got confidence in Matty Bresley. He's only 22 years of age, but maybe they're thinking he might be coming through as a mature rider now. Anyway, this little group is beginning to give us the feeling there might be a surprise result to this year's Paris-Roubaix. There was a lot of journalists at the finish line today when they heard such a big breakaway had established that they were going to get a shock result, and yet that breakaway is still clear, more or less. Lars Mikkelsen has reached it with a couple of riders, but basically they're still ahead by about a minute over the Bonen group and all of the favourites today.
I still think that the big guns in that group behind will all fire together, because they all really want to win, and they're not really that far away. Riders like Cancellara, Boonen, Leif Hoster, they still got good legs. They will wait, I think, till we get a little bit further down the road, because everybody realizes it is going to be, I think, a waiting game in Paris-Roubaix this afternoon because of these strange weather conditions for this time of the year.
Well, 10 days ago there wasn't a leaf on the trees in this part of the world, and in those 10 days with the sun shining, the blossoms are out in full flower and the leaves have burst. Up with the leaders, Kevin Van Impe, David Kopp, Olaf Pollack, the three trendsetters who chose to go alone and try and beat the field to Roubaix. The stadium in Roubaix is now packed with people here watching on a big screen, and they're seeing a very strange race just now. This is sector 9.
So the sector of Mérigny. It's a fairly long sector too at 700 meters. A little bit later on, the riders will go to the Pont Thibault, and that is a long section of cobblestones. Again, you see in this group now they're starting to take it a lot more seriously, as the second group of chasers now, Phil, are ripping it up.
Enter sector 9 here. Stein de Volder from Discovery Channel, and they've got to make a decision soon. It means for the leaders they have 8 sections of cobblestones left, here they are. Smooth roads once more for these three. I've got a feeling that Pollock is sitting at the back because he's looking as though he's taking a bit of a pace here.
He's having a little bit of a hard time. David Kopp seemed to be the freshest rider in that group now. As they came out of that section of cobblestones, if we look over to the left, we should see them. There they are. That's the leading group of three. There's only 30 seconds now separating those three guys there with this group. And in fact, just saw there that in fact Pollock seemed to be coming off the back.
I think he was, but these are 5, 6 riders here. The majority of these from the original breakaway. And still hanging in there. Bjorn Lukemans still there.
Some of these riders survivors from the early morning breakaway. Lars Mikkelsen is the man who's done the job there because he actually rode across the gap.
Yeah, he rode across with Lukemans, and they're both in that group. But there's a lot of work being done here to now. The alarm bell's beginning to ring at last.
Looks like Gusev here on the front for Team Discovery Channel, the big strong rider from Russia who is the leader, I think, for the Team Discovery Channel in this race. While at the back of the race here, you can see what kind of chaos is happening.
You see the motorcycles also carrying wheels here because they can get to places motor cars can't reach in Paris-Roubaix and faster. As we now see a little bit of a warming up of the big hitters. Alessandro Balan, number 21. He's trying now. He's somehow reached a group. I'm not sure where he is.
He's at the back. The caption there at the bottom is saying arrière de la course, back of the race. So that must mean that he's got a big problem.
But how far back? Because our cameras won't go very far back, I wouldn't think.
Well, he was riding alongside William Bonnet there from Crédit Agricole, and he's not one of the big stars of Paris-Roubaix here this afternoon. This is the second group on the road. That's Grabsch on the front. Juan Antonio Fletcher has ridden across the gap. Trying to open up the account for Spain if he can. Never been a great race for the Spanish riders, this one. Although the man who's put in the best performance here ever is in fact the man we're looking at in the orange jersey there, Fletcher himself.
Yes, along with, don't forget, Miguel Poble, who finished the second in this race back in 1958.
It's like Stuart O'Grady trying to get off the front of this group now. Now, they are trying to take this a little bit more seriously now, Phil, I think, because there's another section of cobblestones coming up, and it's strange enough that a lot of these moves are coming on the smooth road rather than on the cobbles.
That's right, they seem to hold their gains when they get to the cobbles. That was O'Grady.
Well, we were right. Race radio just crackling through on my earphones there to say that Pollock has been dropped by that leading group, so he wasn't trying to play a clever game there at all. He was having a hard time with the distance. Here we are. There's confirmation. Kevin Van Impe and David Kopp are now the two leaders of Paris-Roubaix with a 30-second advantage over a group which has got a number of riders in there who I think have got fairly fresh legs.
40 kilometers, 25 miles to go. It's inside an hour of racing left, and these are the two leaders as they hit and clear each sector of cobblestones without problems. Oh, and it looks like Kevin Van Impe there was in a bit of bother as he went into that corner. Unfortunately, we've cut away to have a look at the chase, but that's the way it is.
Well, this section of cobblestones they're riding into is 8th section of cobblestones to go to the finish. This is Pont Thibault, and these riders have now covered 219 kilometers.
Look at
this section of cobblestones. This is the acceleration from Juan Antonio Fletcher.
This is one of the few Spanish riders who knows how to tame the stones of France. He really can ride them well, and he's aggressive. And he's now launched what clearly was a planned move there to try and catch up with these leaders before they get out of control. Pollock is in amongst the cameras there. I can't see him at all right now. He's in the dust somewhere. But this is the group trying to get on terms with the two leaders.
Well, he's in the chaos or the hell of the north right now.
I think he might even be back already. No, perhaps not.
Well, perhaps not, but you can see now there was a big acceleration coming. It's a lot less than 32 seconds, but Fletcher, I think, now has decided to put an end to this and try and pull it all back together if he can, because we're moving into a crucial part of this race. There's a very difficult section of cobblestones coming up shortly. That's the section of Sizouin. That's a long section. There's two sections very close together, ranked at a 4-star rating, so that indicates that they are pretty tough.
And the crowd's now having to step back there as riders try to steal their ground to keep this road as smooth as possible. Plenty of riders willing to work hard, but where are they going to make the move to catch up? Because they're making an awful big job of this, which I take my hat off to those two leaders. They're riding so well.
Stefan Weseman on the front there of this group, just looking down to see what the composition is. That's Peter van Petegem in the dark blue just at the back there. So he's still in with a shout and still in with a chance of looking after Tom Bonen in the latter part of this race. It's the second group on the road there. There's the orange jersey of Juan Antonio Fletcher. Lars Mikkelsen is having a fabulous race here this afternoon. He's riding his way out of the sport. He will retire at the end of today's race. 1.4 kilometers, the Pont Thibault section here, at just 25 miles to go.
Well, Mikkelsen is having no trouble driving the race, but I'm still a little mystified as to why he's driving the race when he's got Cancellara in the group behind. If he's thinking of winning it for himself, then he's throwing an awful lot of energy into the cobblestones at this stage of the day, because Fletcher is a huge danger there in that orange jersey, fourth in line. There are eight riders here.
Place on Mikkelsen here, looking over his shoulder. Come on, guys, give me a bit of a hand here. We've still got a chance of pulling this race back together, but it's all once again starting to close up, Phil. That leading group of two riders has got 30 seconds over that chase group, then 30 seconds further back you've got the rest of the field. This is the second group of chasers. That's Stefan Weseman on the front, and you can see how warm and hot it is this afternoon, because many of these riders have got their jerseys ripped down to the bottom there just to try and get themselves a little bit cooler. Look at the way that cobblestone section there is broken over on the left-hand side. That's why you have to ride right here in the middle on the crown. On the crown itself, and Weseman's first off it there. Sits up just for a moment. Now looks over to see who's going to come and give him a hand and push home the advantage one. The only thing we can be certain about, inside 25 miles to go, is the winner will come from one of these three groups. I think everybody else is out of it, and we're not certain of the location of Alessandro Ballan, but he's behind the race, and I think his chances of winning today are gone. Well, they're minimal. He may well be able to pull himself back into the race. The chaos that is Paris-Roubaix is a very strange chaos to predict, and sometimes you can be a minute and a half behind and you can ride yourself back into the race. I know on one occasion Fons de Wolf did that at one stage at the cobblestones of Sizouin. He was 4.5 minutes behind, and he came onto the track at the finish here, Phil, in a chance of a possible victory position.
Kevin Van Impe now riding hard with David Kopp, two strong men here. They've got rid of Olaf Pollock, who was the weak link, but then he didn't help anyway. Dispatched him back to the group here.
I've got that Ballan is 1 minute and 55 seconds behind, so he's about a minute behind the group of Tom Bonen. It's not completely out for him. If he's still got the legs that he had last week in the Tour of Flanders, he could ride himself back into this race, although it's going to be a very hard call.
We must assume he had a flat tyre. I can't believe on his form he was left behind by the group Tom Bonen, unless he was caught in an unfortunate back end of the split. What's happened here? This is Fabian Cancellara wearing number 1, sat at the back of this group.
Well, I'm not sure why he's gone to the back of the group. Number 22 putting his hand up there was Fabio Baldato. I think he would like to try and find out what's the position of our man Alessandro Ballan, 36 years of age. He's looking for information there, and in fact Jean-Francois Pecheux, the race director here this afternoon, is handing up bottles to these riders. This is a rare sight, Phil, to see in Paris-Roubaix.
I've never seen it before. I've never seen it before. Stein de Volder just coming up alongside Pecheux as well. There's a lot of exhausted riders here heading towards Paris-Roubaix, the finish in the stadium. The atmosphere actually feels pretty tense today, because nobody can work out quite which way this race is going to run. This is the first chase group on the road behind the two leaders, 8 men, constantly being driven by Lars Mikkelsen. And for the life of me, I'm not too sure why, unless you see on the screen there, Matti Breschel has been riding superbly all day, and I wonder if he feels good enough for Mikkelsen to give him all the pacemaking.
I think it may well be just a situation to try and put Tom Bonen into difficulty. Team CSC are putting a lot of pressure on the riders behind to chase them down. They're in a strong position like this. I would think Breschel's legs must be pretty much close to popping right now, because he was one of the riders in that early morning breakaway. Mikkelsen is certainly riding superbly well, but I have to tell you, they are riding a dangerous game here, carrying a man like Juan Antonio Fletcher closer to the finish.
Don't forget that Kopp and Van Impe were the original members of the 33-man breakaway, and they're still out there. And I'm beginning to think about the way Gent-Wevelgem finished in the week. The original 3 members of the breakaway, 2 of them survived to take the places at the line. They didn't win. They were reached by riders from the back, but they got 2nd and 4th or 5th. I can't really remember.
But it's still pretty strange here looking at this breakaway group, because the second group on the road, that group of 8 riders we see now and again, is at 26 seconds, but it's almost 40 seconds back now to the main field, and that was Roger Hammond on the front, and it's very difficult to recognize him in his pink jersey of T-Mobile, so much that we got used to see him in the black and blue jersey of Team Discovery Channel over the last few years.
The sun still beats down in the second week of April on Paris-Roubaix. This number 16 is Kevin Van Imp. On the other side is David Kopp of Germany. They don't look like tired men to me, even though they've been heading the charge since about 30 kilometers into the race today. And they are surviving, more than surviving, they are driving towards the finish in Roubaix. Just look at the determination here on David Kopp. He's a rider that once started out life on Jan Ullrich's Deutsche Telekom team, as it was then, and found if he wanted to be a star, he'd have to leave the side of Ullrich. So he did, and he started winning races in his own right. And now he's on a new team here in Gerolsteiner and looking good.
Moving into the small town now of Templeuve, and these riders now are all starting to get into the very serious sections of cobblestones. We're going to now come up to around about 4 sections of cobblestones in a row, and the section of Cizoin-en-Borgel, which is coming up in a short while, is a very difficult section. And I still can't believe that we haven't yet seen the reaction from the main contenders in that back group. But maybe they are, Phil, today, playing that waiting game, knowing that there's going to be some strange performances over the last 30 Ks.
Are they actually tired, which is quite likely? They had to race all day. And Bonen, I think, is frustrated back there. He's not finding too many friends when it comes to countering the attacks. What has happened to Cancellara, who hasn't been seen really driving at the front? He's been sitting near the back. His teammates have been driving at the front. It could still be a room for a surprise end to this race, I feel, today. And here comes Mikkelsen again, driving all of the time onto Sector 7 at Templeuve.
Well, there's 2 sectors here buckled together by a short section of smooth road. They go straight off this section of Templeuve at 700 meters onto the section of the Pavé de Moulin de Vertin at 500 meters in length. And that may well be just a waiting game, I think, for the big names to start to pull this all back together down towards the end, because this race at the moment is just hovering.
We've turned the power on the windmill. There's certainly not the wind driving. I can assure you that. The trees are still here and the sun beats down. The group Fletcher, we're calling the chase group. It should be the group Mikkelsen, the way he's driving. I think Fletcher, though, now the favourite at the moment to win Paris-Roubaix. And no Spanish riders ever won this race. But last year, until last year, no Swiss rider had won it either.
Well, Fletcher's doing a lot of work as we look through the windmill here in the northern part of France. That's an indication that there's a slight breeze, but there's not very much breeze at all. But Stefan Weissemann here is making a move, and he's actually slipped the group.
Well, he's livened affairs up again as Weissemann saw his teammate Olaf Pollock come back from the leaders, so he's now trying to put another green jersey back up there. Weissemann, who's been a runner-up in this race before, knows all about arriving in Roubaix. He hits Sector 7.
Well, he's now onto the sector of cobblestones at Templeuve, a nasty, rough sector, and he's thought to himself, it is a little bit too rough here, so I'll jump over onto the smooth section at the side of the road. Well, as they come off here, now they're off that section, they'll start again. Another section of cobblestones, but now is a section where they'll start to slow down a fraction, because Juan Antonio Fletcher has moved off the front of the group as he gets a little bit of help there. The gap is around about 30 seconds over the chasers. You can see Lars Mikkelsen and Matti Breschel. I still feel that these riders are going to get pulled back together once we get to the harder sections.
We're looking here at Stefan Weissemann, who has just got away from a chase group of 8, trying to nail back David Kopp and Kevin Van Imp, the 2 leaders of the day. Olaf Pollock was with them, got dropped, went back to the group that's chasing in around about half a minute, and then Stefan Weissemann saw the catch and has launched a job now to try and put himself in that lead group, having seen his teammate drop out of it.
Well, he's a kind of rider I'd like to see win Paris-Roubaix. I remember a couple of years ago, I reckon he had the form to win Paris-Roubaix. And if you remember, he had that terrible problem with his cleats and his foot kept coming out of the pedals. He couldn't keep his foot on the pedals and he kept getting dropped from the group. He'd repair the problem, get back into the breakaway, get dropped again. He deserved to win on that occasion. Right now, I think he's taking what may well be his last possible chance at a crack at winning this race.
Well, I think that's likely to be the case, Paul, at 35 years of age. Stefan now wants to try and make a great result here. He's had them before. He's been a man at Paris-Roubaix. He's finished 2nd and 7th.
There's another split going off the front of that group. That's the style of Tom Bonen. That he's looking over his shoulders all the time. He's trying to summarize who's with him. That's Stein de Volder in 2nd place on his wheel. A little bit further back, I think I saw Leif Hoster trying to scramble across the gap as well for Predictor Lotto.
Well, now look at this. Big Tom putting his head down, going to split this field up. He's going to use all the energy. This time it's a serious attack. He wants to break this race up. He knows he's got to do something. The race is beginning to run away from him. I think Fabian Cancellara is not on good form now. And watch out, it might well be the tall T-Mobile rider, Paul, could be Marcus Bergholt. He was the big surprise of the Ghent-Wevelgem race.
A few moments ago, I saw a lot of work being done by T-Mobile on the front end of that group, and that may well be what the situation was. They got the word from Bergholt that he was feeling good, and they were just trying to set something up for him. These are the two leaders of the race, though. This is Kevin Van Impe and David Kopp. But you can see the face now of Van Impe. The pain is starting to creep into every bone, every muscle in this man's body. And he knows all of a sudden they're about to face up to what is a very difficult succession of cobblestones. You've got Sizouin, followed by Bourgel, followed by Quinfin-en-Pervel, and all of those cobblestones are in excess of 1 kilometre in length, and they're all spaced over 7 kilometres.
Still 8 riders in that chase group behind.
This is the second group on the road now. This is Juan Antonio Fletcher. He's looking very dedicated and very keen here this afternoon to try and get himself a situation where he can possibly make himself the first ever Spanish winner of Paris-Roubaix.
There's the face of Fletcher. I don't think that was a smile. It looked like it was a grimace. As he now continues, now to whip up this pace.
Now looking at the back end of this group, you can see all of these guys all over the place. Team Gerolstein are moving forward. They're around about 30 kilometers to the finish, and that's 18 miles. Kevin Van Impe and David Kopp. And they're now coming into the town of Sizouin. See now the giants of the Flanders, and they're coming now into the town of Sizouin. In a kilometre or so they're going to hit the cobblestones of Sizouin very shortly. There's Stein de Volder on the front. He's the leader there of Team Discovery. This is Tom Bonen. That looks like Marcus Berghardt over there as well, and of course Leif Hoster. So the group Fletcher now at 27 seconds. And this group now, Phil, is looking at 1 minute and 7 seconds. They're actually now in the town of Sizouin. The cobblestone section is going to start in around about 1.5 kilometers.
Well, these are the riders here as they continue now to just chase wheels, grab wheels, try and reform. They can't yet work out how they're going to catch those two leaders. This breaker group of 8 here has started to slip up just a little bit as they continue.
Everybody's tired now, Phil. You can see them starting to put their heads down. They're looking to see if anybody can keep the organisation going. They know at 30 seconds over riders like Tom Bonen, that is going to make it very difficult for them to survive on the next section of cobblestones at Sizouin, because that is a treacherous section. It's 1.3 kilometres in length.
This is Fletcher. Fletcher, the man who is trying to fly the flag for Spain, become the first ever Spaniard to win at this event. Poble did it it was second back in 1958, and that remains their best ever finish in this event. But the sun has taken its toll today. These riders are really suffering now as they try to close gaps.
Just leaving the small town of Louville, and that gives us around about 4 kilometres to the start of the cobblestone section of Sizouin. But it's just 2 kilometres to the town of Sizouin. This is the group containing Stein de Volder, Tom Bonen. Bonen is not looking like a bad man here this afternoon. He's actually looking pretty frisky.
He's looking frisky, but he can't close the gap. These two riders are continuing to set the pace here as we head into the closing stages of Paris-Roubaix. Let's pull back with the cameras. 17 seconds to Fletcher's group, and then just a minute to Tom Bonen's group. And so Bonen's only 40 seconds or so behind the group at the bottom of our picture. And if he could reach them, then we'll surely have a very different race. But time is beginning to slip away. 28 kilometres left.
They're going to have to really hit these next 3 sections of cobblestones very hard indeed. And as I said, Phil, over 7 kilometres, we've got almost 5 kilometres of cobblestones. These are linked together by very short sections of tarmac road. 1.3 kilometres of cobbles, followed by 1.1, followed by 1.8. It's a very difficult long section. Now's the time, if you've got legs, that you can pull this race back together.
Now the riders here still more concentrating on filling up with bottles here. This is the original Milram rider who was in the original breakaway. Grabsch putting on bottle, and Fletcher now he's trying to stretch them once again. What a tremendously strong rider this Spanish man is. We don't see Spanish riders ride like this on these sort of roads. They're never normally at home in Belgium or France at this time of the year. That's why they've never won this race.
These are the two leaders now. David Kopp in the pale blue jersey, Kevin Van Impe in the dark blue jersey. This is now the town of Sizouin. As soon as they start to leave the town of Sizouin, they will go over that cobblestone section. The first section, Sizouin de Bourguel, is 1.3 kilometres, and we've seen some dramatic racing in the past here.
These are the chasers, still organised but still being driven on, and in fact Fletcher slipped back just for a moment here. There's the breakdown for you. Breschel, watch out for him, and his Danish partner there who's trying to coax him to do a great ride today, Lars Mikkelsen, both on team CSC. Mikkelsen for the moment has slipped back into the rear of the group. The crowd now being treated to a very different Paris-Roubaix here. The big stars are all on the offensive, with the exception, on defensive rather, with the exception of Juan Antonio Fletcher.
Well, they're about 50 or 100 metres away now, Phil, from the start of Bourguel, and Bonen's gone again.
In Sizouin, and Tom Bonen has launched an attack, and that's going to cause chaos on the group behind. Reach him now or say goodbye. And this is Tom Bonen, who's caused a cheer in the stadium at Roubaix, as he now wants to try and reach those leaders before it is too late. This is a do-or-die effort by Bonen.
Well, he knows this section of cobblestones that's coming up right now, Phil. He knows there's 3 very different sections together. I'm surprised he attacked right there. He just took the opportunity. That attack, he did that attack with his heart and his guts.
And he's done it before the cobblestones have been reached, but they've come back towards him here now. Onto the cobblestones at Sizouin. This is the group, the third group on the road now, with Tom Bonen trying to reach the group up front. There are 8 riders chasing ahead of Bonen by half a minute, and there are 2 riders leading the field by another half a minute. And David Kopp and Kevin Van Impe, as they've crossed these cobbles in Sizouin, are beginning to feel they may be taking the destiny of Paris-Roubaix in a very strange direction.
Well, the crowd have turned out here at Sizouin to see this long section, 1.3 kilometres. Just looking back, this is a big move here. Everybody now realising we've got 5 kilometres of cobblestones in the space of 7 kilometres. This is remarkable. There are the 2 leaders, there are the chasers. This race is slowly being pulled back together. That is not very much more than 15 seconds.
But just like in Flanders, where the best man won in Alexander Balan, every one of these professional cyclists is totally committed. There's nobody following somebody else's effort. They've got to do it all themselves here, or they simply aren't in the hunt. Stefan Wesserman drives on there in the Fletcher group. There is Fletcher as well. The 15 seconds, the gap, they are crossing it.
Look at the gaps, though. They're starting to come down. It's just 49 seconds to Tom Bonen. Stefan Wesserman now looking at his possibility to try and win Paris-Roubaix. He knows this race. He's been here many times before in a very famous race in the former Eastern Bloc called the Peace Race. He was one of the most successful riders in that event, Phil, and it was often on roads just like this.
And now the dust is beginning to take its toll as well. Stein de Volder heading the pace here. This is Group 3, 2, 8, and then this group. They've had to nail back Tom Bonen. They've done it. Stein de Volder still in the hunt. And as we tick off these sectors of pavé now, there's a lot of riders going to believe they can actually see a great result for themselves in Roubaix.
Looks like Burkhardt there in second position behind Bonen, followed there by Stein de Volder just on the back of the group as well. Looks as if it's still Peter van Petegem, so that will be rather good. I think that's Pollack coming back now in the green jersey on the right-hand side. He will slip away rather dramatically, but Bonen now is assuming the responsibility of Paris-Roubaix. He wants to win this race again if he can.
It's been a long break for these two. They're about to be joined by 8 other riders here. We're shortly going to have 10 leaders in Paris-Roubaix. David Kopp of Germany, Kevin Van Impe of Belgium are going to be joined by Lars Mikkelsen, Breschel, Wesserman, Fletcher. And here it is, coming up 25 kilometres, just on 15 miles from the finish. And now they're going to have to rethink their tactics. This group is now swelling, and immediately, and not surprisingly, an attack.
Well, that looks like Stuart O'Grady, and I don't know where he's come from.
But if it is O'Grady, we never saw him hook up at the back end of the group. We may have slipped down with the cameras here because O'Grady was in the previous group. It's certainly O'Grady, that's for sure.
Well, as Stuart O'Grady wears their number 7, rides for Australia. He's got some of the finest form of his career this last week of racing, and he now is going again, Phil, onto the next section of cobbles.
So Stuart O'Grady, the man who has never learned to say no to anything as a bike rider, is now heading onto the cobblestones Paris-Roubaix. We don't know how he reached those leaders, but he must have somehow got around that group and joined the 8 front runners. There is O'Grady in amongst the traffic. He's got the camera alongside him. These are the chasers with Fletcher. They've now picked up Kopp and Van Impe, and that was the sign for O'Grady to launch the attack. The man who burst out of the shadow of the chase group.
No idea where he came from at all. This is Leif Hoster now in the next group. This is the group with Tom Bonen, Marcus Burkhardt, Stein de Volder over there on the left-hand side. Everybody now, Phil, is trying to throw caution to the wind.
He's Stein de Volder having a go now. 40 seconds is the gap, and the orders have gone out to stop all the cars, and there they are, stopped. The referees want nothing in the gap now. This is a pursuit of the favourites against the hopefuls, and it's a very strange Paris-Roubaix, but it's a great one. Stein de Volder here, the leader of Discovery Channel, trying to reach the leaders, and Discovery really haven't been in this race as yet.
Well, you can see Stein de Volder there has got himself the gap. It's a fair gap too, and he's looking very comfortable on those cobbles, trying to ride away. I think that's Fabio Baldato from Lampre just on the front, also trying to peg him back. But the big thing that I cannot figure out, Phil, is where did Stuart O'Grady come from?
Well, there's no doubt he was there. Our cameras can't be everywhere, but he bridged the gap to that leading group, and now he's trying to dictate it. As we look further down the road, there is Fabian Cancellara again. And the way he's riding here, and there's Gusev as well, Gusev rather. This group isn't looking like it's very lively anymore, Paul. I think the decision's been made up front.
Peter Van Petegem was in that group too. He appears to also be going backwards. They're now also just getting onto that section of cobbles of Bourguel. That's not a good sign for Fabian Cancellara, who showed us last week he had a brilliant set of legs. There you can start to see how this race is splitting apart.
Well, this is a remarkable race now, and Stuart O'Grady has thrown the gauntlet down. Let me just quickly recap the story of Stuart O'Grady all day. He goes off in a breakaway of 33. He has a flat tyre in the forest of Arenberg. He goes back into the Boone and Chase group, and then all of a sudden, despite working in that group for Fabian Cancellara, he somehow found the strength to bridge to the chase of 8 and now go away on his own. And that is the typical doggedness of the Australian. As we look down on this group, and all of a sudden they are so much under pressure, these riders. They look to me as though they're just tickling their red zones now, and they are getting themselves into a bit of trouble here.
It's Fabio Baldato on the front, and he must be wondering where his team leader is, Alessandro Ballan. Many people thought that Ballan may well be able to do the double Tour of Flanders Paris-Roubaix today, but he's more than 2 minutes behind this group. Boonen looking for friends, but he's not got too many here this afternoon. He's tried on a number of occasions to assume the responsibility himself, but it may well be that Stuart O'Grady's going to create the big surprise here this afternoon. This is the Fletcher group now, and the Fletcher group, which a few moments ago was the big chase group, is now a chase group behind Stuart O'Grady.
Well, the cameras have gone away from Stuart. I'm not sure what's happened to him right now. We're looking here, though, at the chase group. That is Grabsch, and this is O'Grady. Here he is now. And I think if anybody deserves the win today, it's got to be O'Grady, and it will be a great win.
He has a 15-second advantage now over that group. He's come off the section of cobbles at Bourguel. The next section is a very long section that he will face too, as the Camphin en Pével, a long section which got a little bit of an incline in it. That's the section where a few years ago we saw George Hincapie crash into the ditch, and his teammate at the time rose to the occasion, and his teammate was called Tom Bonen.
Since then, Bowman has flowered, to say the least, but he's being put in his place a little bit just now. He's tried to make his moves. He hasn't had the strength to drive them home. He was outmaneuvered by O'Grady, obviously, when he did that counter-attack. We're only 22 kilometres from the finish now. Leif Hoster and Fletcher, flick of the arm, coming through and give me a hand. Well, I think Fletcher's done a pretty lot of work today, but I'm not sure whether he's got much strength left. Behind him, another man who's finished in runner-up position in Paris-Roubaix is Stefan Westermann. And this group now containing a lot of riders, but can they get up there? They are fully committed, Paul. They're not shadowboxing anymore.
This is a man we're looking at there leading the race, who's the Olympic gold medalist on the track in the Madison, and I've seen him win road races like this before, Phil, because this was very much how he won the big race, the Commonwealth Games road race in Manchester. This group is splitting up behind him.
They've shut down. They are totally exhausted. This group has shut down. O'Grady won't know this. He's going to get on with the job. What a time trial this would be if he would time trial the last 25 kilometres of the day.
Well, he's the kind of rider who can do it. He's had fine form over this last 2 weeks. And you know, it's 2 years since he raced in Paris-Roubaix because he wasn't able to participate last year. He broke his leg just before the start of the classic season in a nasty crash in Tirreno Adriatico.
Well, he's pushed out to 25 seconds. His advantage now, I think his best ever finish in Paris-Roubaix was 18th back in 2003. But he's had such a clutch of great performances this past 2 years, but really he hasn't won a race since 2004, yet the times he's finished second, third, fourth or fifth in major events, well, even Stewart's lost count.
Well, how about this for a gap? It's 25 seconds to Fletcher, 50 seconds to another chaser, and a minute to the group of Tom Boonen. Stuart O'Grady right now has got to put in the ride of his life, and it's amazing to think that this young man, Phil, has been a professional since 1995. He has won a lot of races throughout his career, but he certainly has always had a real love for these races, the Tour of Flanders and Paris-Roubaix.
He's wanted to put his name on a big classic event, and this is the best chance he's ever had to do that. And I have to say that the former champion, gold medalist at World, Olympic and Commonwealth Games levels, I think if he wins this, it'll be the finest victory of his career, and I think he would count that as such. It's far too early to say he will win it, but watch this now in the next sector of cobblestone at Campfin-en-Pévèle. This is a very, very difficult section. It's 1,800 metres. I think it was down here where Sean Kelly once snapped his handlebars or his forks. I can't remember now.
Well, it was on this section as well that George Hincapie crashed. It's a nasty section. You can almost see the shine on the surface. Again, very deep blue granite cobblestones these, and this section of cobblestones actually climbs up a fraction too before it turns right, and then it levels off, and that's when O'Grady will start to feel just a little bit more comfortable. But right now he is riding through a tunnel of noise. Look at his face. He wants this. You know, when you make a move like this, there is no looking back. There's no going back. You've got to give 110% over these next few sections of cobblestones.
Well, if anybody can win this, it's the tough Aussie, O'Grady, who never gives up. They've got to catch him. He won't wait for them now. So as we look down on the riders here on this next sector of cobblestones, it's Stuart O'Grady of Australia who has got clear by just on half a minute now and has thrown the whole race into confusion because they don't know how to bring him back.
Got to get themselves organised, but the problem is there's nobody else left to chase here. We're looking now at a bunch of individuals trying to pull back Stuart O'Grady, and that's when you start to see the animosity or the alliances begin to form. Looking back there, you can see on the front Leif Hoster. Everybody now really gripping the front of their handlebars, trying to stay solid on their machines as they now think about what are we going to do to turn this race around. Matty Breschel going through there. There's Kevin Van Impe. But this is the man who now leads the race, Stuart O'Grady of Australia. This is the right-hand bend that he will take. Takes it around nice and smoothly. Just a little bit of gravel in the corner there in the past. When we've ever seen this race in wet conditions, this has been such a treacherous stretch of road here. O'Grady now can get a bit of respite because this part of the road is flat.
We go. And now entering the cobbles again. Is this the last desperate effort by Tom Boonen to bring everybody back to order? He's tried on the previous cobbles, it failed. He's trying again to crack them wide open now. He's pulling them into a long line. I think he's getting a gap.
Well, right on his wheel there is Marcus Burkhardt of T-Mobile. I can't see anybody else behind there, but there's certainly one or two other riders scrambling. This is a tough section of cobblestones, and if Boonen has the legs now, Phil, this is the time to do it.
And he knows it, Paul. He knows he's got to go here if he's going to do anything at all. Time is running out. We're inside 20 kilometres, and this now is the ride for Tom Boonen to reach the leaders or not. And I'm not so sure he can go. Nobody will get through to help him until the cobblestone stretch ends. It is the winner of Gent-Wevelgem sitting on his back wheel there, Marcus Burkhardt, who I think is going to be a real superstar of cycling in the next year or so.
Well, he's had a great early start to the season. This race is really starting to be a race of survival, and we've still got, of course, after this section of Cobblesville, the very famous, famous cobblestones of the Pavé de l'Arbre. But Boonen now is looking just a little bit desperate as O'Grady comes off the Canfin on Pavella route, and he's got around about, I would say, 4 kilometres before he gets to Pavé de l'Arbre.
So we're looking now at Stuart O'Grady as he goes for goal. Just 5 kilometres of cobblestones remain on today's Paris-Roubaix. But I'll tell you what, Paul, those 5 kilometres are going to be something rather special for O'Grady. It's not over by any manner of means yet, but 51 seconds at this moment in time, O'Grady is going away.
You are looking at a class bike rider. You see now he's only just now decided to put his earpiece back in. He was riding on his guts here this afternoon. He didn't want to hear what the team manager had to say. He said, I know how to win this race. I'm going to go out and try and do it. We were looking there at a man who's been a world champion on the track, an Olympic champion on the track. Now he's trying to win something that he's dreamed about since he was a young boy.
3, 6, 8, 9 riders here, and they're at 50 seconds now. 50 seconds is the gap to these 8 men, many of them in the original breakaway of the day, reinforced by the arrival of people like Bjorn Lukemans and Lars Mikkelsen. But I think that they've made their effort, and they might have spent their chances here. I don't know where Stuart O'Grady has got the legs from today, but his determination, I think, is making up for 90% of his effort right now.
Well, O'Grady knows the running towards the finish. He was very devastated last year to have that nasty accident in Tirreno Adriatico when he went down. In fact, I think he broke his collarbone and a couple of ribs in that crash in Tirreno Adriatico, and that put him out basically for the whole of the classic season. And he loves these races because these are races of survival. These are races where you don't ride with tactics, you ride on survival and manpower at the end. This is now the Pavé de l'Arbre. He's on this section of cobblestones. To begin with, it's fairly flat, it's fairly slippy.
We're looking at Stuart O'Grady now on the Pavé de l'Arbre here. This is a horrible section of cobblestones. He's 20 kilometres from the finish. He is pulling away from the chase. He's just under 1 minute ahead. And Tom Boonen, trying to reach the chase group of 8, is also in a spot of bother now, being impeded by the following cars. He's going to have to get round that problem. He's in a group of 4. But O'Grady has gone for goal, some 25 kilometres from the finish, and for the moment, he is pulling away.
The amazing thing is, Philly, he came across in the total confusion. We have no idea where he came from, but all of a sudden, he launched himself into the lead. This is the second group on the road, the group of Juan Antonio Fletcher. Behind this group at around about 30 seconds is still Tom Boonen chasing, trying to get himself into contact. But when he contacts this group, he's going to find himself a long way behind, and Fletcher has now gone.
Fletcher has launched an attack, I think to be expected. He's got tremendous strength, but they're all just fighting for any wheel they can find up right now and dodging the holes in the road at the same time. This is Panic Stations in Paris-Roubaix, the 105th running of the event, and an Australian is trying to seek a win here. And if he does, he'll be the first Australian not just to win, but the first Australian ever to get on the podium.
Tête de la course, he'd be very happy to see that because he understands what that means in French. That means the front of the race. This is the left-hand turn. Now look at the dust, the sand that's all over these cobblestones. He has now got himself a minute advantage over Juan Antonio Fletcher. This climbs up. It's a very difficult piece of cobblestones, Phil. On the left-hand side over the top, you'll see the little cafe called the Café de l'Arbre.
And this is Fletcher. They've caught him back again. Fletcher hadn't got the legs to go alone. He didn't have an O'Grady in those legs. Stefan Westermann is the first rider to bring the group alongside. Lars Mikkelsen behind Westermann. Mikkelsen will be feeling pretty content with his work now because O'Grady is riding away. It's 1 minute and 1 second the gap now. Stuart O'Grady over the chase.
Well, O'Grady, once he gets to the end of this cobblestone section, has really only got two big sections to go. The section of Gruzon and the section of M. But we do have to get ourselves through the railway crossing, which was...
at the point now, Paul, where you cross your toes, your fingers, your thumbs, because you don't want a flat tyre at this stage. And every time your bike clatters on those cobblestones, you must wonder if one will snap the tyre. Well, O'Grady now is doing the ride of his life. He's been threatening a ride like this for 2 years, and it's coming today. And I really feel he deserves to win it now.
Well, he certainly does, but there's still a long way to go from here, and anything can happen. Bad luck can be with anybody on the road on the run in towards the Roubaix Stadium. But O'Grady, what a terrific finish that would be for him, Phil, because throughout his career he's been one of the greatest track riders in the world, and to finish here on a stadium like this, I think he will enjoy that dramatically, but he's still got to get there.
And this is back with Tom Bonan here now, but again, I think they're being slowed a little bit by the cars still. These motorbikes are getting too close as well. End of sector 4 for the Australian champion, or South Australian champion he is at the moment, as he swings onto a nice clean stretch of road where he can accelerate. The crowds are huge now. He snatches a bottle with the ease of anything you like. Over the neck goes the water, back to the dust goes the bottle. 1 minute and 10 seconds, but only 1 minute 31 to Bonan. Bonan is catching up.
Stuart O'Grady now onto the next section. This is the section of Gruzon. It's 1.1 kilometres long, but it's not that bad because at the side of it, halfway along, you've got a little bit of tarmac. O'Grady trying to get the motorbike out of his way. He's used it on a number of occasions as a friend. Now he's finding it becoming a little bit of an enemy. This is the second group there, led by Stefan Weissermann. So far, 40 seconds have gone by since Stuart O'Grady went round that corner at the top, and still the clock ticks by.
Stefan Weissermann, another hero of Paris-Roubaix in years gone by, still finding the legs to drive on this chase group. The riders being baked by the hottest sun in the history of the race. But this man knows all about hot sun coming from South Australia at this time of the year. A problem there for Lars Mikkelsen. Well, all I can say is thank heavens it wasn't his teammate O'Grady. Mikkelsen has to get back in the action. Here's what he did. He knew he had a flat tyre, and he went straight in. He skidded on his shoe cleats, grabbed the bike.
That was a bike change. That was a planned bike change. That was unbelievable. The mechanics were there. And this is what, that's him going down again.
That's exactly, oh dear. Well, Lars Mikkelsen has gone down again. He's just got onto the bike and he's on the corner, on the dust.
And you could see the dust coming up there. He was trying to take a few risks. You know, he had that bike change at the end there. He got himself straight back up. He's riding just a little bit too fast there as he went round the corner to try and make contact with that group again.
It's almost as if Mikkelsen, the teammate of O'Grady, is showing us the problems which can still exist in Paris-Roubaix. And thank heavens that O'Grady is staying clear and riding safely. It's about time to tell you that O'Grady, one of the finest track riders in the world in years gone by, can handle his bike better than most.
Well, O'Grady's off the section now of Gruzon. He's got a little bit of time, a little bit of respite. I make it around about 7 kilometres now as Tom Bonan has ridden away from his group on that section of cobblestones, and he's starting to pick up riders one by one.
Well, he might well have gone past Davy Kopp there, who was in the lead earlier, as Tom Bonan now has to cross the void alone.
So Tom Bonan there is ridden away from the group, and he's going to very shortly ride off the section of cobblestones here at Gruzon. He's just gone past there Lars Mikkelsen, who's having a little bit of a problem getting his legs going once again after that crash.
Well, this is a fine do-or-die effort here by Tom Bonan. He's managed to shake all of the gadflies that he was with, and he's now going to reach these leaders by himself. These are desperate moments. He knows time is running out. He knows all of Belgium is shouting for him at the finishing line, even though it's in France. He's 5 or 6 kilometres from Belgium, and that's all. O'Grady knows in these last desperate moments the chase has got to come. He just wants to stay safe and try and keep his rhythm. He's looking good just now.
Looking at 13 kilometres to go, and around about 4 kilometres to that next section of cobbles. The cobblestone section at Hem is not such a bad section because on either side of it, it's got a little bit of smooth road. But this, I think, is going to be the crowning glory for Stuart O'Grady because he was not looking like a rider showing any signs of weakness at all.
Well, these are the 4 riders who've had their day today and really look strong, but now they look a little bit like beaten men here. Stefan Weissermann wants a little bit of help. He gets it from Juan Antonio Fletcher, but Fletcher here is sort of maintaining the pace, but it's not an attacking ride anymore. And Lars Mikkelsen, I think, was back in that group just there.
Well, Lars Mikkelsen, I think, is behind Tom Bonen because Bonen has caught and passed him because he went down with that crash on the cobblestone section. Bonen, though, Phil, you have to say, is riding like a real champion here. He will not give up his Paris-Roubaix at all. He dreams about these races, the Tour of Flanders and Paris-Roubaix, and he's trying to ride himself up to a podium position. But I think today, Stuart O'Grady is too far away from him.
At the moment, but this man is full of surprise. I think it must be Matty Breschel, the CSC man, still able to cause a little bit of confusion. There, just ahead of Bonen now, are the men he's aiming at, and here they are, just in front. This is Roberto Petito, as now the lonely rider, the man cutting the cutting the trail towards Roubaix, where no Australian has ever been in this position to win before. They've never had a man on the podium. There is Vesseman, Leukemans, Petito and Fletcher is the group here, and this is the group that Tom Bonen is just off the shirt tails of.
Well, these four riders now, Phil, although they're not riding with a lot of gusto, and they will very shortly, I think, be joined there by Tom Bonen, who's riding across this gap. But for Stuart O'Grady, what's more important is that little clock on the left-hand side there, which shows 13 kilometres to go to the finish. His gap is not huge, though. It has come down a fraction to 47 seconds, and Boonen is quite a long way behind because Boonen, they're saying, is at 1:27.
So the riders we must be seeing just ahead of Tom Bonen are, in fact, the stragglers of the break. We're going to find out now because here he comes, and Bonen will take a little bit of encouragement from the riders he's picking up. And this will be the rider from Lamprey who was in the break, and probably Grabs. Baldato and Grabs should be who they're picking up here.
Well, Baldato looks over his shoulders. He gets the chance to see the big turbo train that's coming forward. Got to get a little bit of a breather. I think he'll join these riders.
Well, it's almost as if he might be saying, just let me get a breather, or are you going to help me chase here? I'm not so sure.
Roger Hammond in the pink jersey.
Is the T-Mobile rider who's come back from the breakaway. Hammond, who finished third in this race a couple of years ago and has been out in the breakaway all day today. But the distance now beginning to be just that little bit too quick for him and too far. The shadow, you can't believe the shadow or the sun or the heat. And Stuart O'Grady just loves every minute of the route here. An Australian in summertime, because that's what it is back home. And right now, Stuart O'Grady is flying the flag and looking so strong.
Well, he's looking comfortable, but he has to bear in mind what happened to his teammate last year. His teammate said towards the end last year he was attacked by a severe charge of cramps, and that really hurt his legs. And at one stage he was riding along on the small ring, but then he managed to get himself back into it. He's opened up the gap again, Grady, a little bit to 56 seconds. He looks superb. This man has got an incredible pedaling action. It's very smooth, very supple. He keeps it going all of the time, and he will be waiting to get through this. And let's have a look. There's no lights flashing. There's no barriers coming down, so O'Grady is safely through.
He's over the one that caused all of the problems last year. Now he's set to cruise home if he can hold off. He's been away for exactly half of the distance that's left to go, so he's now halfway home. It's going to be a tough call to survive to the end if anybody gets inspired here. Bjorn Leukemans is the rider sat at the back. Fletcher's the man driving at the front. That's Petito, 125, and Steph Vesseman, a former runner-up in this event, now back up in the lead.
Well, Petito, one of the survivors of the early morning breakaway. I don't think he's got an awful lot more firepower left to contribute to the chase. The two men who came up, in fact, Stephen Vesseman in the green and Juan Antonio Fletcher, who would dearly like to get himself back up to Stuart O'Grady, but they are actually starting to lose time. Vesseman dropping back, trying to get some help here from Leukemans.
These four riders now, Petito for one, I'm sure, is a ticket collector, a passenger, sat at the back of the train. He can't contribute to the pace. Fletcher wants to and is so doing. So too is Vesseman, has been a real powerhouse again. This is the next group on the road, led by Roger Hammond. Momentarily, I think Kevin Van Imp is down there as well. But they are going in the wrong direction right now. And Bonen is with them. And Bonen is going to have to go alone again very soon.
Well, at that last railway crossing there, the official time gap to Stuart O'Grady was 55 seconds. And it's 1:10 here to Tom Bonen, so he's not very far off the Juan Antonio Fletcher group. And if you see that little chaos in front of him, that is the group with Fletcher.
Well, I think all the men that matter, who will affect the result, are over safely. The level crossing, which saw the disqualification of 3 riders last year. Vladimir Gusev, Peter Van Petegem, and another rider completely forgotten right now, but it'll come back later. As we're now looking at the chase here with Bonen having to work with these riders, which to me tells me that Bonen has cracked.
Bonin is having a hard time closing down the last 15 or 20 seconds. The time that they're giving to Tom Bonin is 1 minute and 32 seconds. I think he's a little bit closer to the Fletcher group than that, but O'Grady is hovering on the 1 minute mark, inside now of 10 kilometers to go and not very far away from starting the section of cobblestones at M.
Well, when you think about the day of O'Grady, he was part of that original breakaway. He went back to the group containing Tom Bonin because of a flat tyre. He left that group, he joined the leaders again, and now he is free to fly for himself. A remarkable day's outing, that's for sure. Well, O'Grady's puffing and blowing, there's his face, but I don't think that's a tired man, that's a determined man, as the sectors are being ticked off. Sector number 2. Just 2 sectors remaining now of Paris-Roubaix as we look at the leader here, Stuart O'Grady, approximately 8 kilometres from the finish, and his gap pretty constant, just on 1 minute over the chase group of 4.
He still has to be very careful indeed, because although there's a nice piece of smooth road to the side of this cobblestone section, it was actually this little part where you flick across from left to right that Henny Kuiper nearly lost his Paris-Roubaix, because his tyre actually flipped off and the mechanic was very slow in coming from the car. In fact, the mechanic couldn't get the wheel out and had to go back to the car to get a spare bike. But O'Grady is absolutely flying around these corners, and as you said, Phil, a little bit earlier, he is one of the best bike handlers in the business.
He's ridden 251 kilometres. Just 8 of them remain now, and they're going to be the hardest of his life, but they may turn out to be the happiest of his cycling career. And believe me, O'Grady has had some great moments in cycling, especially on the indoor velodromes around the world at all of the big events.
Well,
He is the Olympic champion, let's not forget, in the American, the Madison.
Well, we're looking at around about a 45 to 50 second gap for Stuart O'Grady. He's got to dose his effort now, because at the end of this section of cobblestones, he'll actually ride into the town of Hem at 6 kilometers to go, and there's a nasty false flat. If he goes over the top of that with 30 seconds, I predict they'll never see him again.
If Stewie even senses the outskirts of Roubaix, they'll never see him again. Such will be his determination to nail this one back. It's an event he's never actually excelled in until today, but now he's really trying to excel in this one. We're looking now at Stefan Westman, one of the other heroes of the day for sure, and in his twilight years as a professional cyclist has really produced a ride today, and he's more or less carrying this group now, because I actually think that even Fletcher has hit the wall.
Well, Fletcher was the man who made a big effort to try and get away on a number of occasions. I think everybody, oh, that's a tricky move there as O'Grady flicks across, but you saw he was still agile. He was still able to just lift the front end of the bars up to get it over that little ridge of cobblestones at the edge of the cobblestone section of the road. He still looks comfortable, but I tell you right now, the whole of his body is screaming in hurt. But because this is Paris-Roubaix, because he's inside of 7 kilometers to go, he can accept that pain right now, because he knows he'll accept it for a little bit longer.
Stuart O'Grady dances on the pedals. He's approaching 6 kilometers from the end of Paris-Roubaix. The gap's 1 minute 5 seconds. He's building on Fletcher's group. 1:37 on Bonin, who is now getting no closer. They've all reached the limit of their ability, and Stuart O'Grady may be at the end of his ability, but he's in the lead in the race, and he's going to win.
Stuart O'Grady now has just got to get himself nice and sorted out. There's one section of cobblestones left to go, Phil, at the end, but it's not really a real section. It's an ornamental section of cobblestones at 300 metres. Getting on board another drink.
Taking a drink at this stage of the race is against the rules, unless the referees have made the decision that because of the extreme heat today in April, they're allowing feeding right up towards the last 5 kilometres of the day. If they're not, well, it wouldn't be a disqualification infringement, it would be a fine, so perhaps the water was the best way out. There's the composition of the group, still going, but not like it was before. This group has finished its pursuit.
Well, now what they're thinking about is just surviving and fighting out the podium position down towards the end, because I think they're starting to realise, if you look at the way they're riding, they're starting to realise now that, in fact, Stuart O'Grady has flown the coop.
Well, he timed his effort. It was around about 25 kilometres to go where O'Grady appeared in that breakaway from nowhere, attacked and was gone. Nobody chased him, and he rapidly gained 25 seconds, and then he settled down, and now he's got 56, so he's come back ever so slightly.
The Lamprey rider in this group, by the way, is Enrico Franzoi. He was also one of the survivors of that early morning breakaway. Tom Boonen trying to ride himself back into this race. But sadly, I think this afternoon he's left it just a little bit too late. It's been a very strange race. It's been made a little bit more strange, Phil, because of these weather conditions. None of these riders could ever have expected a classics race to be run off in heat like this.
No, and we expected a quick one with no wind and hot sunshine today. It's been just that. A breakaway of 33 riders getting away was too big a group. The favourite should really have monitored it. Even though O'Grady was in it, he was the biggest name really in that breakaway. And they've seen him and had a chance to tame him, and they've failed right now. And at 5 kilometres to go, boy, that pano, or the notice board, is going to be music in his ears. 5 kilometres, 3 miles.
He's now inside the town of Hem. He'll just move his way through the main street, then he'll take a right-hand bend, which all of these riders know. And once he's made that right-hand bend, it drags up a fraction, but there's the first right-hand, followed by a left-hand. But that little false flat is going to feel like a massive mountain to him. But once he gets to the top, it's flat for about a kilometre, and then he plunges down into Roubaix and the outskirts of the velodrome.
Well, at this point last year, there was a CSC rider cutting his own path towards the finish, but it was Fabian Cancellara who was flying the flag for CSC. Now it is Stuart O'Grady, and he's proving to us all that at long last, after all of his placings in major events, he is a man for a big race, and this is going to be the biggest victory of his career.
Well, to add to his Olympic gold medal, his world title as well, he is a very good bike rider. I think the amazing thing we seem to forget sometimes about the Olympic Games in Athens, Phil, was he rode the road race, went to Germany to ride on the track, and came back to ride the track with Graham Brown, where they won that gold medal in the Madison event. But here, I think, is something that he has dreamed about for many, many years. He used to watch the videos, he used to watch the TV of Paris-Roubaix, and one day wanted to try and win this race himself. He was pretty good last week in the Tour of Flanders, and he showed us that his form was fine.
We are looking at Stuart O'Grady of Australia here, grimacing as he looks himself for the 4 kilometres to go board, and there it is. He's holding his gap. He's around 56 seconds ahead of the chase group of 4 riders, and then about a minute, well, there we are, minute 6, he's going further ahead. 1:28 on Tom Bonan's little group of 3. Stuart O'Grady is about to give Australia its first ever win in Paris-Roubaix.
Still supple, still keeping the nice cadence up there. He's breathing deep and hard. He knows how hard it is, but he knows this race, Phil. He knows if he can just get over the summit of that climb, he can coast down to the finish, and he will cruise into this stadium.
The face of Juan Antonio Fletcher, again promising one day to be the first ever Spaniard to win this race, but it's not going to be today. As a little flick of the arm from Bjorn Leukemans calls through Stefan Westermann. These boys are racing for second place, and they know it, and they'll be very conscious of the fact that Tom Bonan is about a minute or less behind them, so they'll want to hold him off. And Roberto Petito here, sitting at the back and hanging on, he could well be in a better position to win the sprint for second when he comes into the velodrome.
Well, these two riders are really at the front doing most of the pacemaking. They've got a couple of passengers there.
So we're looking down, they've gone past 4 kilometres to go now, as we're continuing to see the long straight road ahead, and right in the distance the lone figure of the Australian O'Grady, riding to his finest ever result in a major classic race. There's the counter-attack. It's come from Leukemans, looked over his shoulder, forget it. Fletcher was right on him immediately.
Here's Tom Bonan, though. He can see the little bit of contretemps in front of him, and that's the group that he wants to get to. He is battling now. He probably knows at this moment, Phil, he's not going to win Paris-Roubaix, but he knows he's got a very good chance still of getting himself onto the podium.
Absolutely. Second place is still a possibility. These boys are freewheeling. They're throwing it away. Leukemans wanted to split it up. Fletcher nailed him back and then couldn't help him anymore. Well, the result will be company, and it's coming up in the form of Tom Bonan here. Stefan Westermann at the back with Petito.
All of this is actually very good for Stuart O'Grady, because of what it means is the impetus could come out of that group and they don't have the power anymore. They're not riding at a steady pace of 40-45 kilometres an hour, while O'Grady has now crested the small climb out of Hem, and he will already be plunging down into the outskirts of Roubaix.
This gap is ever so small, but it's taking an awful lot of bridging here. It looks as though Steph Westermann also now is either feeling the pace or is just lying off the back of them to launch an attack. These are the bikes which have carried these riders across the cobbles today, and this man has handled them better than anybody else. Stuart O'Grady now, to me, is finding his 3rd or 4th win He knows he's won the race. He's beginning to enjoy it.
Well, he's now inside of 2 kilometres to go. He knows now he can almost walk around the velodrome here. There, in a few moments, he will flick across into the central reservation here in between these two roads and take on the last ornamental section of cobblestones, the final section of cobblestones in Paris-Roubaix this afternoon, just at 300 metres. But for O'Grady, this is going to be a phenomenal win.
Just listen to these for his results since 2003. Third in the Tour de Flanders, third in Paris Tour, third in Milan-San Remo. He won the Hughes Classic in Germany. Then he finished fourth in Milan-San Remo, and this year alone he's finished fifth in Het Volk and fifth in Milan-San Remo. All near misses. Now he's going to flip onto the last sector of cobbles, and these don't hurt. They're quite smooth. They put them in as a sort of tribute to Paris-Roubaix. When he comes off them, he'll enter the stadium to an enormous cheer.
And he will be waiting for that moment. This is a moment he's dreamed about, and he now knows as he sees the Flamme Rouge, the red kite there, Phil, that he's only got 1,000 metres to go, and around about 750 of those metres are on a velodrome where he's really, in the world of professional cycling, carved out his reputation.
This is the track. He's seeing it first. He knows he's won now. He's got to go round the stadium 1.5 times as he flips into the road that takes him to the entry to the velodrome. The arrival of this great race coming home yet again for the 105th time, and it's being led for the first time ever by an Australian cyclist. Here's the entry to the velodrome. Listen to the crowd. An enormous cheer, the tongue comes out, the cheeky little man, Stuart O'Grady. It's a classic position for him. He knows all about track cycling, and he's done it. He can master any track in the world, usually in a gold medal position. Today, he is mastering Paris-Roubaix.
He knows he's got it now, Phil. All he's got to do is ride 500 more metres, and this is really basically a lap of honour here for Stuart O'Grady. He's 3/4 of a way round now. He's on the far side. He's going to really enjoy this. This has been the greatest ride of his life, and he won this the same way as he won the Commonwealth Gold Medal in Manchester on the road.
Stuart O'Grady is down the back straight. His pursuers aren't in the stadium. It's all over. His chance to take the applause now. Never before has an Australian stepped up into the first three. They start at the top. O'Grady is about to win Paris-Roubaix for the best win of his career and his 46th road race win of his life. And he'll remember this forever. And what a way to win it, from the break, back to the bunch, back to the break, to win on your own. A classic win for a classic bike rider.
He's promised this for many, many years, and he really has dreamed, I think, about winning this race. 42 kilometres an hour as O'Grady has now crossed the line. He's won Paris-Roubaix, and now he can try and get his breath back. But these guys have still got to fight it out, Phil, for second place.
Bjorn Lukemans, who was also in that early morning break, leads them through here as O'Grady gets mobbed on the infield. If our camera can find the race for second, we'll tell you what's going on. But at the moment, it's still Lukemans on the front. Fletcher trying to get a Spanish rider on the podium and equal Spain's best ever position. As we're now racing here for the second place, Bonin is also on the track, but he won't catch up now. And this could be another remarkable result for Spain, but watch out for Stef Westerman. He may have to settle the third, though. And this is a great result for Spain, equaling their best ever finish of 1958. As Fletcher gets that, Westerman gets third position over the line. Bjorn Lukemans gets fourth as they chase them down now. Tom Bonin right up behind them on the line, finishing just behind Roberto Petito. He actually caught the group on the finishing line.
That's a great ride by Tom Bonin. He wouldn't give up at all, but it's been a brilliant ride and a brilliant afternoon for Stuart O'Grady. He won it in magnificent style, Phil. He won it in the way of a true champion. And the amazing thing is, we don't even know how he came across the gap.
So O'Grady throwing kisses to the crowd, then the emotion finally comes through, because Stuart O'Grady has suddenly realised exactly what today he has achieved, and that is win Paris-Roubaix, the one classic race that everybody wants to win. And after all of his near misses in the others, he gets the big one, and he gets it in such a spectacular style. The groups continue to come in with Fabian Cancellara, last year's winner in this group, but only too pleased when he looks across to see that Stuart O'Grady is the man receiving all the kisses, the hugs and the pats on the back. So this will be seen as a great result. Cancellara wears number one. And going through on the inside now is a man riding his last race, Lars Mikkelsen, trying to finish off with a little bit of a flourish. But it's all in the slipstream now of what has been a very strange race in many ways, but a great edition of Paris-Roubaix, because at the end of the day, the early breakaway did decide the result, although nobody would ever have predicted quite the way it worked out.
Hey, Brian.
How do you feel? How do you feel? Stuart. Stuart, how do you feel?
Hey, man.
Relief.
Stuart, yes. Stuart. Hey, how you staying today? Huh?
Lars, a tough way to go out of a career, but quite a magic one too, with Stuart O'Grady winning the race. Sadly for you, finishing on the ground.
Yeah, that's true. The Team CSC had a fantastic race, and I knew I had to go out there from early on, and I felt extraordinarily good today. And when Stuart attacked, some like 25 k's to go.
Just look over your shoulder there, because Stuart's on the podium just now.
Yeah, he really earned it.
But what happened to you when you changed the bike there? That was a little bit sad.
What happened was I had a half-flat tire for a while on my back wheel, and I decided to change my bike. And getting on a bike with a whole different pressure on the tires really surprised me. So I was, of course, giving it full gas. I had to come back. But the new bike just bounced under me, and I couldn't control it, and I was on the ground.
But you're a little bit a part of this victory, Stuart O'Grady's this afternoon.
Yeah, you know what? I organized this party for a long time, since it's my farewell. Thanks.
Scotty, that was a win of the team this afternoon, really.
Yeah, everybody. What Lars has done today, what the rest of the boys have done, what all the people have stood on the side, they're giving bottles for the guys and wheels. That's what you really call a team effort today. And
a little bit of Australian history too.
yeah, there's a bit. It's fantastic. No, it's great.
One of the most beautiful moments in my life. On the bike. It's amazing. It's a dream come true.
It was a really tough race with a lot of dust.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to win today or die trying, and you know, the team has just been so strong. We've been up there every day, every race, and you know, we just have such depth in this team, and everyone has their own shot. And Fabian was the leader, and there was no questions. But the opportunity arose, and it's not often it comes off, man. But when it does, it's bloody sweet.
Stuart, you've been dreaming about this for a long time. You've loved this race, Tour of Flanders, Paris-Roubaix. Must have been a great day for you.
Oh man, the emotions, the emotions are just amazing. It really was. It's a dream. It just goes to show that in this sport, nothing's impossible if you keep trying. You know.
It was real confusion on the TV because all of a sudden you weren't there, and the next minute you were there and you were in the lead. How did that happen?
Yeah, I punctured on the Darrenberg, and I thought it was all over. I just had to sit up and wait for the bunch to come back. And,
Yeah, man, good ride.
It's a dream, it's been a dream my whole career since I began cycling, and yeah, you always hope that, I always believed that I could do it. We just have such a strong team. Fabian was the leader for the day, and that was 100%. We're behind him, but like every dog has his day, man, and today that was my day.
What went through your mind when you decided to take off in that breakaway group so early in the race? Were you already thinking about victory, or was that just a team order?
That was the plan. It was the tactic. I knew it was going to be a weird Paris-Roubaix with such good weather. I knew a breakaway was going to go a long way, and when I punctured on Darrenberg, I thought it was all over. I'd wasted a lot of energy up the front, and but when you see your team up there, Mikkelsen, Cancellara, Lindqvist, Matty Breschel, all the boys have just done a phenomenal job all day, and when you're up there in numbers, you win races, and it's unreal, man.
When you saw Paris-Roubaix for the first time when you were a child, it made you want to become a cyclist. Now you win it.
Man, you got no idea. I didn't even know road racing existed in Europe. Never heard of Paris-Roubaix. But when I saw that cassette, it was I was mesmerised. It just looked like the biggest adventure, and I was hooked straight away. And I remember coming into one of my dreams was just to make it to this velodrome, and it took me about 4 goes, and I was about 45 minutes behind the leader, and or delay, and no one was here. But I was just so happy to make it, and dreams come true, man.
And you still had that energy in your legs in the final kilometres to take off once again and go for the win.
Yeah, look, we were going to win this race no matter what today. Said to the boys this morning, we're going to win or die trying, and that was 100%. There was not a millimetre more I could do, and it was the right moment to go. Everyone looked pretty stuffed, and we had numbers up the front, and there's no holding back today, man.
And there's the result. Stuart O'Grady, the first Australian ever to win this race in 6 hours and 9 minutes. Juan Antonio Fletcher equals Spain's best ever result since 1958, getting second place. Stefan Wesserman, a former runner-up in this event, coming third this time. And Bjorn Leukemans gets his finest ever result, fourth. Tom Bonan coming home in sixth, and another great ride by the British rider Roger Hammond, who confirmed his form in Ghent-Wevelgem last week when he finished second. The majority of those names, Tom Bonan the exception certainly, were in the early morning breakaway. So it just shows you sometimes the breakaways do work, and this is how it all happened. This is where O'Grady made his move that nobody could follow, and the rest, as they say, is history now, as the 105th Paris-Roubaix has finished with an Australian winner. For Paul Sherwin, I'm Phil Liggett saying see you next time. Goodbye.